Hey, what's up, guys? What's up, Michael? How you doing?
Hey, buddy, how are you?
Good, good, good.
Good to see
How's
you, Gabe.
how's everybody? Another Saturday with Collection Wars.
Yeah,
This one is for the books. I'm I can't wait to show you guys this interview. Um, Michael and myself did this interview yesterday with Don Bies, and it is just mind blowing. You know, a lot of people, recognize Don from some of the special editions and the shots and art too. But we discovered he's way, way, way more involved in Lucasfilm than we all thought. And you guys are in for a treat. And some of the stories, holy moly! Um, we got our buddies already kind of jumping on. Got Coy. What's up, Coy? How you doing? Got Sean. What's up, Sean? How you doing? Chris.
Armando.
Armando, fellow sidekicks and side
Yeah, hey,
dishes.
hey, Armando. We're not sidekicks. We're officially
Just
brothers.
brothers. George, what's up, George? Tim, what's up? Got Big Cap Pete. What's up, Pete? How you doing?
Happy Fourth, Pete. Hey, Pete, you're gonna like this one, man. This is really cool. This guy's it's really useful. Can't wait for you to see it, man.
It's insane. Primetime reviews, what's up? Russell, what's up? Yeah, guys. This is one of those episodes that has something for original trilogy fans, something for the prequel fans, a lot for prequel fans, for super Star Wars, the super fans that are into the details. We're talking R2D2, Builders Club, Boba Fett. This has everything. It's one of those episodes that I'm
Yeah,
just so excited.
this guy worked in the archivals, right? The archives.
Yeah.
He worked in the archives at on all of the at the ranch,
Yeah.
and not
He
only
was
that,
he,
but
he was the archivist, like
yes,
for the Lucasfilm archives.
yeah, man, and it's crazy that just I mean, this guy worked side by side with Mr. Lucas. I mean, he was with George on a lot. He traveled all over the world working with these
Oh
guys,
yeah.
and it's just the stories that he has. And me and Gabe, we talked about it, and we kind of set it up at the end of the show
Yeah.
of our interview yesterday. But what was is so cool about what we do, right, Gabe, is
No.
how Collection Wars, we archive ourselves these unbelievable,
Yeah.
God, it's
I
just the
mean,
talent,
just yeah. These people that are in the industry that
the industry.
literally. Don, and you guys will hear. He kind of single-handedly like changed some of the stuff that the fans like obsess about, and it was his decision to make some of these things. And
Yeah, things are now canon, you
yeah,
know,
but exactly, like he
because of it.
literally like he molded some of our childhoods, right? Like, and again, he was, and again, we'll watch it. It's
Yeah,
a long interview, and it's
yeah,
great, but I don't want to give too much away because
yeah.
this.
I just got to just say, just a sneak peek of when he starts talking about how the Boba
Oh,
Fett thing happened, and
oh
and
yeah, no,
and
no.
how
Let's
he ended
let's
up being Boba Fett. It's like what the
Yes.
hell?
Right. So
Yeah,
yeah, Don ended up, yeah, he played Boba Fett. He's one of the Boba Fetts, right?
yeah,
There's five, I think, total. He's one of them for the special editions. He
yeah,
dressed as Jango Fett for for a shoot. Yeah, and again, you guys will hear it, and it is just such an amazing just history, right? And everything that he put into the films, and just his contribution not only to just Star Wars, but like just his portfolio, right, Michael? Like
yeah.
all the other
It's
films he
amazing.
worked on, The
Yeah,
Fly, Pearl
yeah,
Harbor,
yeah,
Indiana Jones.
yeah.
You guys are in for a treat.
Yeah,
So
we're very. I mean, I just can't believe that we have these industry guests on our show. From and me and Gabe were lucky enough to meet Don at a celebration, and it was good that we met him in person. And then he was wide open to be on Collection Wars, and here we go. You guys enjoy it, and thank you guys
Yeah,
for spending your Saturday evening on the 4th of July weekend with us. We really appreciate
always. Yeah, and we appreciate all the support so much, and
it.
you know, and again, all everything that we do, we try to do it for you guys, and guests like this just kind of validate everything that we try to do and
What the show's about.
wish for, right? And what it's about. I want to bring up before we start the interview. I want to show the picture. I'm pretty sure I sent it to you, right? The picture of us at Celebration with Don. Let's see.
I'm just playing right now.
Oh, with the here we go. Let me just bring that up really quick, just as a quick little intro. So this is a picture of Michael, myself, and Don
Yeah.
at the Regal Robot booth at Star Wars Celebration. And that's where we got to meet him. And I'm telling you, you guys are in for a treat.
Thanks, Armando, for the nice words.
Yeah.
Yeah, all you guys. And we'll talk to you. We'll be right here when the interview ends. So we'll see you guys in just a bit.
Yeah, we'll be watching with you guys because I mean there's a lot of cool stuff. So all right guys, let's get to it.
Rock and roll. Thanks, buddy.
Hey Don, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Gabe, I'm trying not to geek out too much. I'm trying to be as professional as possible.
Trust me, I'm me too, right? Obviously, huge fan of Don and all the work he's done in Star Wars. But me, like I said, I hold a special place in my heart for the R2 unit. So
Well, R2 is the best character, isn't he?
Absolutely, yeah.
Really cool.
Get him. Michael has his turn on. I got to turn on.
R2, say hello.
I know.
This is Don. It's Don. Hey, Don, I do want to just say that it was awesome being able to meet you in person. With me and Gabe happened to be together when we met you over at Tom's booth, and it was really, really exciting. And then finding out the backstory of your history in Star Wars and other things that you've done was just absolutely mind-boggling. So congrats on all of your success and what you've done, man. It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
absolutely.
Being in the right place at the right time helped. So
yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. And can't wait to ask you some questions, especially right now. Right now when the prequels are really just on.
I know there's like a newfound love for the prequels with everybody, isn't it?
It's crazy.
And we'll get into that because we definitely have some questions on there. But Don, we usually like to ask our guests, first and foremost, kind of your childhood, right? I mean, we're all into this fandom stuff. Obviously, we grew up with Star Wars. Were you into science fiction? What kind of stuff were you into when you were a kid?
From a really early age, I was into movies. The first thing I remember being aware of was I was about 6 years old and I saw Boris Karloff's Frankenstein, and was just fascinated with how they made a guy look like that. So this led me down a path of makeup effects and creature makeup and that, and so this was mid to late 60s and early into the early 70s. So that was just the start of all the whole Universal horror films. So I devoured all those. I grew up in Chicago, so we had a great thing on Saturday night called Creature Features. So I would always stay up late and watch those. And then little by little, I got into science fiction a little bit, and not too much. I mean, I wasn't a hardcore science fiction, not like with novels or anything like that, but certainly a lot of the movies that came out. Certainly liked all the stop motion epics, King Kong and Ray Harryhausen's films and that. And the makeup led me down a path of being fascinated with apes. So Planet of the Apes and King Kong and all that. And then, De Laurentiis's 1976 King Kong. And of course, by then I was aware of this guy named Rick Baker that made monsters. And, of course, Rick played King Kong. And then in early '77, I saw a picture of this what looked like an ape kind of creature for this new movie that was coming out. I figured, well, I got to go see it. It's got an ape in it, and I see everything's with apes in it, So, and of course, it was Chewbacca and it was Star Wars, and that just I kind of blew my mind. And it was there was a lot that happened in 1977. I was 16. I just got my driver's license. Star Wars came out, and then I got my first job. And the job I was working at was an amusement park near Chicago. It was the first indoor amusement park. It was called Old Chicago. Yeah. And for 3 days, a film crew came and shot a movie there. Huh. So this all happened in the summer of '77. And it kind of sealed my fate. So watching them shoot the movie, it was a Brian De Palma film. It's called The Fury. It's one of his lesser known films, but it followed up after Carrie, and it was about telekinesis, these telekinetic twins. Kirk Douglas was in it, though I didn't meet Kirk Douglas. I only met one of the actors, but I got to meet the makeup artist, who's William Tuttle, who did makeup for Seven Faces of Dr. Lao and the Time Machine, George Pell's Time Machine from the early '60s, and then the effects crew, who, because in the movie, mm-hmm. excuse me, the telekinetic kid, sorry, the telekinetic kid puts a ride through a restaurant window, and so I got to watch the effects guys, rig this stuff up. And one of the guys that was the head of the crew was a guy named A.D. Flowers, and A.D. Had worked on all the. He went back to the '30s. He was quite old at the time. He went back to the '30s working in film. Apparently, he had worked on Wizard of Oz. Wow. And the more recent films he had worked on up at that point were like Tora, Poseidon right. Adventure, Towering Inferno. So this guy was, he was. Very cool background, Yeah. I didn't know a lot of that at the time. I researched and found out who he was after the fact. But just to get to meet him, I got to hang out with the effects guys and watch how they rigged the ride and everything. And like I said, it just sealed my fate. It's like, okay, I'm gonna get in the movies. I'm gonna do this. So that's what led me down that path.
Wow. So as a 16-year-old, obviously, Star Wars, driver's license, seeing these movies, I
was the right age. I was a perfect age for it.
Absolutely. So then let me kind of just ask you specifically about Star Wars, obviously, because, we focus on that. So you watched it in '77, you became a fan, and did that kind of follow you was that kind of your goalpost as far as, getting into the industry, or you're still...
Yeah, well, sort of. It opened my eyes to filmmaking. So there, that was one of the first films where they were really talking about all the different behind the scenes disciplines, not only visual effects, but sound and editing. Yeah. And the other, and the actors, how they made the cut, everything, there was so much that things were being put out about that. So every aspect of filmmaking at that point became fascinating to me. So that spread to other films and discovering other films, and non-science fiction films, films like The Godfather and things like that led me down, like I said, to just being fascinated with how they make a movie. And so it was a huge turning point. It definitely was. It made me just decide that that's what I wanted to do. And I wanted to make movies, not necessarily like Star Wars, but I wanted to make movies. And then, I really like the technical end of it. I wasn't into cinematography, although I love cinematography. I love camera work. But I was really fascinated with editing. I was really fascinated, of course, with makeup and prop making and that sort of thing. So I started doing that stuff on my own, and then I started working on doing theater in Chicago because that was the only thing that they didn't have much of a film industry at that point. So allowed me to experiment and play. So I got to build sets. I got to make props. When Star Wars came out too, I built I built my own full size radio controlled R2D2.
What?
So
when was that? What year was that when you did that?
I probably first time I finished it was 78.
Wow.
And then I
before the times.
yeah, and then I continued reworking it, and like, I had, again, very little, you had just like Starlog magazines and that sort of thing. There wasn't a whole lot of research that you could do. So I bought the model kit, and then I just figured I scaled the model kit up. The dome being the hardest part to make. It's like, how the heck am I going to make the dome? I could figure out everything else, but it's like that compound curve. How can I do that?
Right.
And so at my high school, the statute of limitations have expired, I'm pretty sure. At my high school, there was a dome garbage can cover. And so I asked a close friend of mine who I was going to school with, who was known for being a bit of a, let's say, juvenile delinquent. And I offered him a ride home if he could, because I drove, if he could grab that dome for me. So he did. And I got it, and then took it home, and I had to take the flange that was on it off, and then I had to extend it down.
Wow.
Fortunately, my dad worked at a place where he could get some parts, help me with some parts. They had a machine shop where they could like bend metal and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And he was also very handy, and so he helped me figure out how to do some of the stuff. So we had this little workshop.
So you are the original R2 builder. I mean, let's face it. Like, right?
I'm sure there were others. I'm sure there were others at that time. But yeah,
I just want to know if you still have that. Please tell me.
I don't know. So what happened was that I had the first iteration of it, and then I wanted to rework it. And, like the body panels, it was simply just a piece of plexiglass that I was able to wrap around 2 rings of plywood. And the arms were solid wood, and then sanded and smooth, cleaned up and smoothed as best as I could with the skills I had at the time. But the panels were all pinstriping on
wow.
So it just gave the illusion that it had all that, panels on it, but there was no depth to it. So one of the first things that, I think the next thing I tried, I was never happy with the dome. So I was able to find a local supplier that had a plexiglass dome that then I could, work out a little better. And again, with that, it was just the detail was painted on.
Yeah.
There were no panels cut out. I just masked it off and made the thing.
Was that one of your resume pieces?
It actually was I'm jumping ahead a number of years, but when I tried to get my first job in California at a place called Chris Wallace Incorporated, CWI, for the movie The Fly.
Oh wow.
I was submitting a portfolio of work based on what I was doing from a makeup standpoint, because they're doing creature work, and I was like, I'm going to be the next Rick Baker, And my creature work wasn't as good as certainly not as good as Rick, and certainly not as good as a lot of people that were out there at the time. But Chris saw the R2D2 and in the portfolio and said, so what's the deal with this? And I said, I made that, and I kind of, it was a last minute idea to throw it in there. I didn't want to come across as a fan, I thought that might affect me negatively.
Exactly.
So so he's like, oh, so you know how to do mechanical stuff? And I'm like, yeah. And you know how to work a mill and a lathe and all that. And I'm like, oh yeah. And I didn't know what a mill was. So about a week later, I got the job and I moved out to California. Wow. So, but yeah, it was it was the only time it was on my portfolio. I've shown people pictures of it. Somewhere I've still got pictures of it. I don't have it with me anymore at the moment, but somewhere I do have pictures of it.
Oh man, that's awesome. Yeah, if you find one, said it.
Okay.
We'll show it during. But
so what I'm saying is that I was constantly rebuilding it, and then I had it in pieces, you know, the motors, and I was re-upgrading everything, and so it was in a bunch of pieces, and it was at my parents' house, and then I moved out to California, and I left it back there, and then they moved out of that house, and I'm not quite sure what happened to the pieces, to be honest.
Yeah.
I would love to have that. I remember, Don, when I'm 52 now, but when I was 21, I moved to California. I was actually 20, and from Texas. And I don't know if you remember Landmark Entertainment Group,
Oh yeah,
a company there. I got a job from showing pictures of a Star Destroyer I built out of plywood and paper mache and country crock butter. I mean, but it looked legit. But I mean, it helped me get the job. But
yeah,
like you said, I was worried as well as being too much because I know that they're not really looking. They're looking for
yeah.
talent.
So Don, so you let's kind of go back a little bit. So you figured out that you could build stuff. You're passionate about it. How did you kind of get into the industry? Was that your first kind of
Well, like
industry?
I said, I was doing theater in Chicago, and I was I was enjoying that. I really like set design. I like prop making. I didn't do much lighting, although I tried it here and there. So I was really enjoying that technical aspect of it, but it still left something to be desired. It wasn't satisfying the creative urge enough, you know.
Mhm.
And I knew I wanted to get into movies, but I couldn't do it in Chicago because there, like I said, there wasn't really much. I did look. I looked at local television stations, thinking that might do it, you know.
That's what I did.
And but you know that it's just TV. You know, it's not. They're not doing anything to they're not making content in that sense.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was my brother's a doctor, and he had a patient that came to his office, and my brother had a model of a foot, a human foot, an anatomical model.
Mhm.
And he happened to casually mention, he's, oh, my son would love this. And he says, my son's really into makeup and monsters and stuff. And my brother goes, oh, well, so is my brother. They should get together.
Yeah.
So I met, they put us together. And this kid, he was a kid, literally a kid. He was like 15 years old when I met him, Keith Edmeyer. And Keith, and I was, I guess I was about 20 or so. So we're about 5 years apart at that time. Well, still are, but yeah, I was out of school. He was still in high school.
All right.
And we, we got together. We started doing some projects together. He was amazing. I mean, he was an amazing sculptor, artist, makeup artist as well. And he was corresponding with not only Rick Baker but with Dick Smith, who was an icon of makeup effects.
Yeah.
And so he was just blew me out of the water. He was his talent. Anyway, he eventually got a job at Rick Baker's shop.
Oh.
And so he moved out to Los Angeles, and I would check in with him every once in a while just because I was interested to see what he was doing.
Yeah.
And we talked on the phone, and he happened to mention that he heard that he was going to go talk to this guy Chris Wallace up in Northern California, and about this job job. They're looking for crew on the movie The Fly, and so he says, you should try giving him a call, and that's what I did. Sent in the portfolio, and like I said, within a month or so, I was moving out to California. So.
Yeah, that's scary but exciting, right?
It wasn't terrifying. It literally, for me, it wasn't scary or terrifying at all. It was like,
dude.
This is awesome. This is
Later.
so awesome. Yeah.
That's,
I thought it was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
Sure. So is that so on the fly? Did you end up you worked the special effects and you got in?
Yeah, I was like put with the mechanical team, and I guess in the echelon of crew, mechanical team seems to be a little higher than most of the other departments, except the sculptor and makeups, because everybody else below that are mold makers and finish people, and that sort of thing, all incredibly important for the process.
Mhm.
But somehow the mechanical people are always more respected because I guess they assume that you have more education than everybody else. I don't know. I certainly didn't. So I had like major imposter syndrome my entire career because I was never classically trained in anything. I just kind of made it up as I went along, and I just learned from people. And fortunately, I had amazing people to work with, and one of the people that I met and I was working really closely with on The Fly was a guy named John Berg. Now John did with Phil Tippett. They originally worked at a studio in Los Angeles where that's where Dennis Muren came from, and Rick Baker was in, and Ken Ralston, and then they did they were brought in to do by Rick the Cantina creatures, and John did some of my favorite creatures. He did the Hammerhead guy, and then they were asked to do the stop motion sequence of the chess set.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing is, everyone, Phil is the one that continued on, and there you go. It's great that you get, he's right at the top. Yeah. Because, a lot of people don't realize that, like I said, Phil went on and continued with this and, amazing career in visual effects and everything. But on the chess set, John was the lead animator. Phil did the background stuff.
Yeah.
And so then they got hired to do Empire Strikes Back, and they left Los Angeles. John's a Los Angeles native, and came up and did Empire Strikes Back. And John, of course, did my most favorite sequence in all the movies is the Walker sequence. And Phil was kind of took the lead on the Tauntaun, and John took the lead on the Walkers.
Wow.
And so to get to meet John when I got there, I didn't even know he was working there. And we initially didn't work together. I was working with other people, but then the big creature that Jeff Goldblum turns into at the end of the film, we called the Brundlefly. I don't know why, or the space. Well, no, they called it the Brundlefly. We called it the space bug, and I don't know why it was called the space bug, but it was called the space bug. And it was this really cool puppet that John engineered and designed, and it essentially was out of the back of the bug was a post, and that sat on a fulcrum, which was on which was a dolly, and on the other end of this shaft was John. And so when he would move one way or the other, the puppet would kind of give that
that's so
movement.
Cool.
And then they'd have other puppeteers doing the feet and the other aspects of the puppet. So I got to work with John building that, a couple other people, and actually one of the other people that worked on it was like I said, I just listened for the first 20 years of my career to other people. But one of the other people working on it was a guy named Guy Hudson, and he had worked with Brian Johnson's crew in England. He worked a little bit, I think, on Space 1999, but he worked on Alien, he worked on Empire Strikes Back, and between John and Guy, they kind of set me down the path of the best way to approach a problem, and they were just so much fun to work with.
Yeah.
And John and I, Guy unfortunately passed away, but John and I are still good friends. Matter of fact, I just talked to him last week. Yeah. So, and I ironically, we share the same birthday. He's a little bit older than me, but we share the same birthday. So
that's really cool.
we have a very close bond.
I found a picture of the fly, right? This is the creature.
Yeah, that's Space Bug. Yep.
Yeah. That's so cool. I used to be terrified. I remember watching it as a kid. I was terrified of this. Yeah, that's the scariest thing for me.
I made the aside from making some of the mechanics in the body and everything like that, I made the eyes move, and I made the little mandible things twitch.
That's so freaking cool. That was a very scary movie for me, though.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty creepy film. Matter of fact, there's a bunch of sequences. If you have ever watched the DVD, they have in the special features, they have the sequences that got cut. Oh. And then, unfortunately, a lot of the work that I did on the film were in those sequences. Oh. So he at one point he tries to reverse the process of the effects of merging them together, and he takes a cat and a monkey and combines them.
Right.
and it doesn't go right, and it turns into this horrible mess, and then he beats it to death with a stick. So I got to work on the mechanical monkey, what we called the monkey cat, and then he's dejected after that. This is all one continuous sequence. He's dejected after that, and he climbs up.
A little blurry, but it's
that's when the face splits off, and
oh, okay, not the cat.
reveals. But he climbs up to the roof, and if you watch the movie, he's constantly like scratching his side. He's constantly itching it, and what that was is this little arm in the sequence works its way out of his skin like a little fly arm, and he reaches over and he gnaws it off and throws it on the ground, and it twitches. I made that arm.
I found the monkey cat.
There you go. There's the monkey cat. Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, we made two versions. We made one that was like highly detailed as far as animatronics, which that could be. I'm not sure which one. They both look the same. But then we made a one that just flopped. It was hinged in the center, and it had a motor on it. It was actually a Makita drill motor, a Makita drill with an offset cam. So it just did this, right? So if you would put the thing on the ground, it would just like flop around, and if you pull it on a string, it looked like it was running along. So.
So I wonder if that thing even exists anymore, if it's deteriorated or not.
What's that?
I said, I wonder if that thing even exists anymore, if it's
I believe it does. There's a collector in LA, Bob Burns.
Oh yeah, he's got.
I believe he has it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's probably pretty decayed.
Yeah. That guy. Have you been to his place?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Tom's told me some crazy stories. I mean, that's just absolutely. I would love it. It blows my mind.
Yeah, he's got an amazing collection of stuff, and I mean really, really old stuff too. Yeah. You know, he's got those time machine. Yeah, he's got the King Kong and Mighty Joe Young armatures. Yeah. He's got Glenn Strange's boots. Glenn Strange was like a kind of a father figure for him, and so Glenn Strange played the monster in a number of films, including Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, and he's got his boots from that. And then the thing is, he befriended a lot of these makeup artists. Rick Baker in particular. I think he gave Rick his first job, or helped him in his career. Talk to people, and so Rick was really good friends with him. Chris Wallace was really good friends with him. So when these guys got rid of stuff, they sometimes say, "Hey Bob, you want it?" Yeah. And he's got an amazing. He had the Nostromo from Alien. Yeah. And that was a funny story that he told me, that he every year he would do these Halloween shows, and the biggest visual effects artists in the late 70s and early 80s were working on these in the late 60s before they were anybody. John and Phil and Dennis Muir and Ken Ralston and Rick Baker, and all these guys worked on these things, helping them put them together. And after Alien came out, he worked in the industry, and I guess he made a phone call to 20th Century Fox and said, "I'm going to be doing this show, and do you have any like pictures and reference material?" And they said, "Yeah, we'll send you something." And apparently a truck pulled up in front of his house and unloaded a whole bunch of props and stuff. Wow. Because they didn't know what to do with it, so they gave him the Nostromo. They gave him a bunch of props and real things from the movie. So that
blows me away, man. Jeez.
I mean, it's kind of like the whole, even Star Wars, right? Like the first steps, they just started throwing everything away, putting it in storage rooms, and just
there's a number of things that had they not needed to, because they sent them over for the original film, they sent them over to LA to do pickups, so a lot of, like Luke's land speeder and those kinds of things would probably have just been thrown away, but they made it to the US because they needed them, and then they just hung on to them, and who knew that the movie was going to be anything,
So it's like we had Gus Lopez on the show, and obviously the Death Star, right? That whole story is insane, right?
The Death Star, and actually I'm somewhat connected with that story.
Are you?
Yeah, because I used to be the archivist at Lucasfilm.
Wow.
And I was technically the second and fourth archivist. So when I was the second archivist.
Yeah.
David Craig was a guy was considered by Lucasfilm the first archivist, and he left. And then in '87, when I got my first job at Lucasfilm, well, actually, it would have been in early '88 by this point. They wanted to put together a big exhibition in Marin County, where Lucasfilm's located, at their county fair, which happens to be going on right now. The fair, it's a 4th of July county fair, and so this was 1988, and they want to put on this exhibition of the stuff from the archives there. Yeah. So we did that, and 43,000 people came through in 5 days.
What?
There were 4 or 5 hour waits, to get into the thing, because a fire marshal would only let so many people into the space at any given time. So after that, they realized, hey, this stuff is worth something. Not that they thought it was trash, but they're like, well, maybe we could exploit it.
Yeah.
And maybe we should have the archives cleaned up. So they hired me to clean up the archives for 2 weeks, and I stayed for 7 years. And
so you were working at the ranch?
No, the thing was, the archives weren't at the ranch at that point. So when at the end of Return of the Jedi, they put everything in a couple different warehouses and decided what they were going to keep, and some stuff they did destroy, unfortunately, but it was mainly larger pieces that weren't easily stored or were falling apart. Anyway, so it was mainly the stuff that was made at ILM, not as much of the stuff from production, first unit production, except for the stuff that was shot in California and everything, and then keep people's wardrobe, Luke and Leia and Han Solo and that.
Yeah.
So they put it together in several warehouses, and that's where it was when I started. And then in '91, they built at the ranch. They built the archive building, and then I supervised the move out to the ranch over the course of about a month. So,
do you remember the ranch manager that worked out there, the foreman back in 1991? His name was David. Do you remember him? I ask people that question all the time.
There wasn't a David. There was a Tom Forster was the ranch manager, actually.
Man, it might be. Yeah. Was he there for a long time?
Yeah. He was there from the time I started until he retired, and he passed away a few years ago. But and his wife, he met his wife there. She was originally Maureen Lambert, then she became Maureen Forster, and she was the executive assistant to the president at Lucasfilm for a long time.
Oh wow, I gotcha. So,
but they lived on the ranch. So it was Maureen and Tom. I'm trying to remember who took over for him. It would have been after the 99 or so, I think.
I remember the name because I had to write an apology letter. That guy, by the way, was super, super classy guy.
He was, yeah. Well, if it's the same guy, yeah, he was.
Yeah. I think that the guy that I'm thinking of was somebody that was below him, that was one of that worked on the fire team or whatever.
He oversaw the fire team. Yeah.
Because it was the ranch manager. So just real quick, I tell the story. It's kind of goofy, but I got arrested for trespassing.
You're the ones we heard about.
Yeah, so this was in 1990, and when I was arrested, it was at night, and I went to jail. Well, the next day, went ahead and left. I was trying to get on with the model shop, and you hear about a lot of these guys that get on and it works out, and you hear these awesome stories. I was that guy that didn't get in, So, but what happened though was the next day, I just didn't want to leave there with them thinking about some dumbass kid from Texas. So, but on my way to the airport, I saw Lucas Valley Road, and I just said, screw it, and went over there. And long story short, when I pulled up to the gate, I said, look, I'm not here to cause any trouble. Well, that's when he pulled up, and he pulled me to the side and said, hey, what's going on? And I told him, and he said, look, we get a lot of crazy people here, but you go home. And I know it's like this guy right here, but he said, you go home and you write an apology letter, and we'll drop all the charges. That way you don't have to worry about flying back up. And he was really sincere. I mean, I was in tears. I was bawling.
That sounds like Tom, actually.
Yeah, he was so good to me. I just was hoping that he would have said, you want to go meet George? Come on in.
No, they wouldn't.
Yeah.
They actually had in the little booth there, the guard shack, they had pictures of people that were like not
Allowed to
to
go.
watch out for.
Oh, that's
Oh, there
hilarious.
you go, Michael. You
So
might.
maybe your picture was up there for a while.
And for so many years after I built my gallery here, I did call the police, the
Marion
local
County.
police department. Yeah, Marion County. And at that time, it was before the computers were really into, and they just didn't have the archives back then, because I would have loved to have had my mugshot.
Is so Don, I mean this. Yeah, this is. I did not know that. So when.
Oh, so I didn't get to the how I'm connected to the Death Star.
Yeah.
So I was working at the archives, and there was the lady that originally hired me is a lady named Judy Niles, and she kind of had the job that Steve Sansweet eventually had years later. It's kind of like not so much head of fan relations, but she would help organize the fan events or whatever was going on, which was not a lot at that time. George was specifically moved away from Star Wars from after Jedi until pretty much the prequels or special editions, really. And so there was not a whole lot of Star Wars happening there. But she would manage any appearances in her. Anyway, we get this phone call. I think trying to remember the order of things that happened. But anyway, Judy calls me up and says, this guy this wasn't Gus, by the way. It was the guy that Gus bought it from. He has the original Death Star. I said, really? And she says, I told George, and he says that it couldn't be because they blew it up. I said, well, they didn't blow it up. I said they had a model and they blew up and superimposed it. She goes, oh, okay, well, let me look into it. So then the guy sent photos, and I might very possibly still have this letter somewhere, but he sent photos in a letter. Obviously, this was before email, and not only did he kind of explained the story of where it was, where he found it in the thrift store somewhere in the Midwest. Yeah. And and people were using it as garbage because the deflector disc was missing, and they were using it as garbage.
That just blows my mind every time.
Yeah, and how it supposedly came there, but he had these like detailed set of photos where he was trying to screen match it. So he put a light bulb in behind it and put the picture of Dennis Murin holding his light meter against it. Yeah. And I told Judy, I says, that's it. That is the model. We don't have it here. And she's like, well, you have a Death Star. I says, no, that's Return of the Jedi Death Star. I said, it's not the same one. That is the model. Yeah. And she's like, okay, well, I'll tell George. And so she told George, and then I think they asked how much what you want to give it to us? No, we'll sell it to you for like $25,000 or whatever. Yeah. And George says, no, I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy back my own piece. So that's how Gus eventually wound up.
Wow.
I remember Gus talking about them wanting to buy it back. I mean, we're interested in buying it back, but
George was not. George wouldn't do it. Yeah. I mean, that's happened on numerous occasions where stuff that popped up at auction and everything. And at least when I was there, they'd say, "Hey, well, we got this. You want to have it back? It's going to be so much." It's like, no.
So, hey, Don. So this famous picture right here. So is this when you first kind of got in there? Is this the warehouse, or is this already at?
No, this was on the main stage at ILM, and what they did was. This was 1983, is right. Well, probably might have been late 82 or early 83, that where they brought everything that was at ILM at that point, all the models and stuff, into the main stage. And that's when George and Tom Smith, who was the head of ILM at the time, and Deborah Fine, who was the head of the research library, who he entrusted the archives to, walked around and said what they should and shouldn't keep. This is obviously all the stuff they kept, right? Because all of this stuff, every one of those pieces, that was in the archives when I left the archives. Yeah. So they had this up there, and they put it together, I think, just for a photo op. So there's pictures not only of George standing in the middle of this, but there's pictures of Dennis Muren and Phil Tippett and Joe Johnson and model shop guys and everyone that was working. I wasn't there at the time, but everyone that was working there at the time had a picture there.
This is such a treat, and Gabe, thank you so much.
I know. I'm like, we gotta take advantage of the Don's here and learn all this cool history of it.
Gabe told me, Don, before we went live that
I was like, I'm gonna be geeky now, so bear with me. Don, I had a question for you. Now that you were up and close with the archives and all that. So I was fortunate enough to get to go to the Skywalker Ranch. My sister-in-law works for Pixar, and we got to go, and I got to see. Sometimes they put things in display, like right by the gift shop. They had a couple of things on display. I saw an AT-AT that was used, and I looked at the leg, and on the leg, somebody scribed trouble.
There was a problem here.
Yeah, trouble was here. Do you know? I was searching the internet. I'm like, who wrote that? What does that mean?
Tom Sanamon.
Really?
Holy cow!
Because when John Berg, John worked with me out at the ranch for a little bit. We were doing a couple projects, and he came out, and he'd come out for lunch every once in a while when I was out there. But we did a huge restoration of stuff in '93 for a Japanese exhibition that was going on. So I hired a bunch of model makers from ILM, and we had, I don't know, we probably worked for 2-3 months or something restoring pieces. We restored, and when I say restored, just made and cleaned up. There were a couple pieces that we really restored. I'll tell you about the Rebel Blockade Runner in a minute. But but there were 3 walkers made, 3 model walkers made, and a prototype. The prototype's missing the bottom of the front leg. And I always wondered for years what happened to it. And then I eventually found it in a box in another place. And it was with a bunch of legal documents. And it turned out that that was when there was a lawsuit about that the walkers were inspired by this guy that claimed that Dennis Muren saw the design and they stole it from him. Huh. The guy lost it's called the Seiler lawsuit. The guy lost the lawsuit, but it was the prototype walker foot. So it's cut from the knee of the walker down to the foot. And it was a piece of evidence that they used to show how different the design was than what he was saying that he had. And that John Berg had told me for years, he says, because when I first met him, I said, do you have a walker? And he goes, no. He says, but I used to have a foot, the foot of the walker. He says, but I gave it up for this lawsuit and they never gave it back. I said, oh, that's too bad. So I found it eventually at the archives. And I asked George's office, I didn't ask George directly, but his assistant, and she knew John really well. And she says, of course, let's give it back to him. So with George's blessing, they gave it back to him. So John has that foot now. But there's a walker in the archives, which is the prototype walker. It was the first one that they made that's missing its foot, and that's the one. And so there's 3 other ones in there, and then there's the chicken walkers. There's or the ATSTs. Yeah. There's the one that was made for Empire Strikes Back, which has a little cameo that walks on, and it's only detailed from the one side, from the left side, because that's the only way you see it. And it was kind of a gag thing that they threw together. I think Joe Johnson and maybe Tom Sanamon put it together, and they animated it for one shot, right? And then they liked the design, and so they refined it and used it for Return of the Jedi. And of that one, there's different scales. There's a larger scale that gets its head crushed and falls over, and that. But then there's a stop motion, a go motion actually, chicken walker, and then there's the original stop motion chicken walker from Empire. And like I said, then there's the 3 walkers, the 3 primary walkers, and one of which they used for the scene where in Endor, where it comes up to take Luke away with Vader. And that one's distinguished from the rest of them because it doesn't have snow left on its feet. It's got moss and everything. And that's the one that it's written. It has a problem on it. There was a problem here. There's so cool. Yeah, and I asked John about that when he came out, and he said that looks like Tom Sanamon's writing, because Tom animated it for John.
What a great story, Gabe, that you brought up.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, because when I saw it, I was like geeking out. I was looking at it. You could see all the wire, like, the wires still kind of sticking out
for
because
the
it's
lights.
missing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's missing the collar part of it.
yeah, because the collar was foam latex and it fell apart.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I started like literally like looking at like little pieces of it, and I saw that inscription. Somebody wrote. I was like, that's funny. I wonder, who wrote that?
And
Like,
a lot of the models have, the original models have all these little Easter eggs in them. They're, the big executor, the executor, depending on how you say it.
yeah.
Vader's destroyer has this little Nazi, buried in the detail. There's all sorts of little on the Falcon, Millennium Falcon, the big Falcon. I call it the 4-foot Falcon. Everyone else calls it the 5-foot Falcon. But at ILM, they called it the 4-foot Falcon because the dish is 4 feet in diameter. But the fans call it the 5-foot Falcon because it's 5 feet long.
Because the mandibles.
Yeah.
That one's on my hit list.
But that's got a lot of little jokes and there's a drive safely bumper sticker on there.
That's funny.
And then the what I call the 2-foot and everyone else calls it 3-foot Walker.
Yeah.
Falcon, sorry.
32.
That has all the model makers' signatures on it. It's all written.
So Don, I know we're getting ready to get into some stuff that it's going to probably I don't know about that Gabe's going to shock me about, but a question. So this might be a really dumb question, maybe premature, but did you work with a lot of like Steve Golly?
Oh yeah.
So Steve, I've known Steve for almost 2 years, and he's been off the grid for. Have you talked to him in the last year?
No, I haven't, but I know people that have talked to him. I mean, and
he's been really off the grid because he's always reached out to me and very respectful. One of the coolest guys, especially in the model making industry.
Oh, he's incredibly talented. I had he was the head of the model shop for Phantom Menace, and so that's when we worked the most together. And then in 2010-ish or so, by that point, Steve had retired. I had left ILM. Well, the ILM model shop was actually, it wasn't my ILM at that point. It was called Kerner Optical. I opened up my own shop to do this huge exhibition in Europe of NASA memorabilia. And because I was designing the exhibition, I thought, I would always like it because that was the other thing that I was a big fan of was the Apollo program and NASA growing up. And it's like, I would love to see a bunch of great models, big models. So I decided that what this exhibition needs, because I was designing it, so it didn't matter, needs a 10th scale Saturn V. And so we built a 33-foot long model of and we built a 24th scale space shuttle.
Wow.
We built Skylab, and we built a bunch of stuff. Anyway,
you still have that?
What's that?
Do you still have that Tandem 4? Do you still have that model?
Oh
no.
Oh, the NASA stuff.
The NASA stuff. No, it's actually still wherever the exhibition is. Gotcha. They took it. Yeah. Anyway, so I needed model makers. So I knew the only other person at ILM, 2 other people at ILM that were huge Apollo fans like myself, was a guy named John Goodson and Steve Golly. And so I asked Steve. John was working still at ILM. Steve was retired, and Steve lived literally around the corner from where the shop was set up. So I asked Steve. I said, "Hey, you want to do this?" And so I hired Steve to make models with me. And we also had Nelson Hall, we had Lauren Peterson, we had Charlie Bailey.
Wow.
John Goodson eventually joined us. We had a couple other guest model makers from ILM that would pop in for a few weeks and work with us. And I sat there at one point, I looked around, I said, holy cow, I got the Empire Strikes Back model shop.
Yeah, that's insane.
That is badass.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun doing it. So.
That's so cool.
Wow. And I mean, not only that, I mean, Don, your filmography, right? All of the movies, like some epic movies that you've worked on. I mean, you're talking about you worked on Indiana Jones, right? The Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2, Fire in the Sky. That one was also really scary for me as a kid. Starship Troopers.
Scary movie to work on too.
Was it?
Yeah. Well, it was a nightmare. It was one project I almost quit on. So.
Oh, geez. Yeah, and I mean, you got Galaxy Quest, Pearl Harbor. I mean, and Peter Pan, War of the World, Mission Impossible 3. I mean, Pirates, right? You worked on Pirates of the Caribbean. But obviously, us as huge Star Wars fans, you worked on the prequels and the special editions, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, all those films. But there's so many talented people out there, that working, and like I said earlier to you guys, I said I happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
So I obviously had a set of skills that they could use, and they were able to hire me. And there's so many other people out there that unfortunately didn't get the luxury of that luck that I had, and by working at ILM, you just happen to be able to work on the coolest movies that, because they get nothing but cool movies. And so, we were the only one that I wish we'd have gotten that we lost was Apollo 13. I really wanted to work on
especially with your NASA.
Steve Golly would have run that show, and but it didn't come through ILM, and so we didn't get a chance to work on it. But I worked on the special editions. I left the archives and I came to ILM to go back to the model shop, because the way I had the deal set up with Lucasfilm originally was that because there wasn't a lot of Star Wars stuff going on, I would work at the archives in between my film jobs. So, which was great, because so many people I knew went on unemployment. I didn't have to. I could just bounce back and forth. And Debbie Fine, who was my boss at Lucasfilm, just was like, there's nothing pressing. We just want you to keep organizing the archives and do the occasional character appearance, because I coordinated those too.
Wow.
So it was a great setup. It was a wonderful setup for me.
Yeah.
But then as George started writing the prequels, then he was starting to move into doing the special editions, and simultaneously it started heating up at Lucasfilm. Debbie left the company, and they wanted a full-time archivist there. So that's when I became the full-time archivist. But then I was missing the ILM stuff. So I left the archives, and they hired somebody else after that. And I went back to ILM, and the first things I was working on was the special editions. So I wasn't really building anything for those. I was helping, I was supporting. I was doing stuff for live action shoots, the Wampa.
We gotta talk about that.
Let me
talk about the
some
Wampa
of these up really quick. So
so I didn't have anything to do with building the Wampa, but I was there to make sure Howie Weed, who was playing the Wampa, didn't die. But then I also was in the special editions a lot too. That's I'm on the left there, and Howie's in the suit. Mark Siegel, who I think sculpted the face and did a lot of work on this, the creature, has his back to us. The guy in the white shirt in the background is Dave Carson, who was a visual effects supervisor at ILM, and he was running the special edition stuff. And then of course it's George there.
So this is the scene where they added where he's eating the meat, right? And he like looks up.
Yeah. So they built the set at ILM, and and I'm actually holding I think I'm either holding a cable.
Yeah.
It might be an air hose. We were blowing cool air into his mouth.
Oh yeah,
it was hard to pull the mask. You couldn't just pull the mask off.
That's what it looks like right there.
Yeah,
it's cool because the way y'all shot that, you couldn't really, after seeing mine, the scale, you couldn't really tell the scale.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's funny. There's a tauntaun head inside the cave, and that was one of the model makers who's now a makeup artist. Who that's all you ever wanted to be, was a makeup artist. He Danny Wagner. He sculpted that, had that at home. He just had that laying around at home. Wow. So he offered it to be used in the sequence, and then took it back home.
Wow.
So I never saw that. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's. I think it's more in the behind the scenes photos that you'd see it. So,
I see a lot of archive pictures of the Wampa. Yeah, that's.
So I was also the one of the Biff Cantina band members.
Oh yeah, let me show that first.
Yeah. So what kind of happened that Tom Kennedy, who was a producer of the special editions at ILM, they were constantly coming up to the archives and either requesting costumes or requesting reference, have someone come up to take photographs of models and that sort of thing. Like John Knoll came up and just did a total photo study of the X-Wings and then went and built a digital model of the X-Wing, and that's what's in the film, right? So they were planning this musical number to replace the original music number. And I won't get any debate about whether he should have done it or not. I had a ball doing it. So, but the we called it Jedi Rocks, and one of the things that they asked, they said, we want to use the Cantina band member masks. And it's like, well, we don't have them. The Doug Beswick, who sculpted the masks, and a couple of the other guys have their castings, and Lucasfilm didn't own them after the shooting of that sequence, in Star Wars. So I said, I know where I can get one. I said, but the only caveat is I have to play them. So they said, sure. So
that's so cool.
So I called up Doug Beswick. I didn't know him. I knew of him.
Yeah.
And he rented that mask to us. And this mask just sold at the prop store auction.
Oh, this is the one from this last
auction. Yeah, I think it sold for $120,000.
Yeah.
But it was an original mask that was used on, the first film, and then I wore it for the special edition. So when we were shooting the sequence, we shot this at ILM and the main stage. They built the set, they recreated the set. My good friend Nelson Hall is next to me. You don't have the photo, but he's the Greedo looking character, which was specially sculpted for the sequence. And then they hired 3 dancers from San Francisco Ballet, or Smuin Ballet, actually. Smuin Ballet is a ballet company within San Francisco. And Michael Smuin, who since passed away, but it was his ballet company. And he was there, and he choreographed the girls to dance and for the dance and all that.
Wow.
And we had a rehearsal day. This was shot on a Monday. We had a rehearsal day on Friday. And Nelson he was out of town. He couldn't make it. So we had a mutual friend of ours stand in for him. We weren't wearing the masks or anything, but there are some behind the scenes photos of that around. And Blake was the other guy. And we're watching them give choreography to the dancers and everything. And we're just, the musicians, and I turned to Blake. I said, we need to do something too. So while they were rehearsing and playing the music, and George was figuring out what, angles he's going to want to use, and he's talking with everybody, Blake and I worked out a routine that we're, and it was just, Blues Brothers kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just doing that and moving back side to side.
Yeah.
So Sunday,
the
night before the shoot on Sunday night, Nelson came back from out of town, and I had a cassette of the music. So I went over to Nelson's house, and I taught him the choreography so that on Monday, when we started shooting, we could do this sequence. So we started shooting, and like I said, I had already left the archives, and I noticed at one point George is talking with Rick McCallum, and then they start laughing. Rick's like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. Let's do that. Hold on, I'll go ask." And he comes over to me, and it was just a break in filming. He says, "Don, do we still have a Boba Fett costume at the ranch?" And a whole bunch of costumes had just got shipped to Smithsonian for the big exhibition, The Magic of the Myth, which toured in the mid-90s.
That was awesome.
Yeah, and the costume that we had put together for that, the Boba Fett costume we put together for that, was gone. But we had boxes of other parts, right?
Yeah.
So I had to think about it. It's like, there's probably it's in pieces. I said, but yeah, there's probably a Boba Fett. And he goes, okay, so George just had this amazing idea. He says, when we get done shooting with everything, we're gonna shoot the sequence where Boba Fett's trying to pick up the girls. And I'm like, Oh, okay. And he goes, so who, so can you get can you pull together a costume? I said, yeah. I said, well, when do you want me to do that? And he goes, well, at lunchtime. He says, well, we'll have a PA drive you up to the ranch because we were at Island. We'll have a PA drive you up to the ranch and you go grab the costume and bring it back. I said, okay. He says, and now who can fit in it? Who can wear it? And I can.
Yeah.
And I had actually worn it before for a couple of character appearances.
Yeah.
So he said, okay. He says, so go get the costume at lunch, and you wear, and we'll shoot this at the end of the day. And that's how it happened. So.
That's
Man,
the coolest damn thing ever. That is so.
I know.
And it's funny from the Boba Fett community, the hardcore Fett community. I've heard a lot of complaints about the suit because apparently it's mismatched, or its parts aren't authentic to the Return of the Jedi Boba and everything. It's like, sorry guys, I had 10 minutes to pull together the costume by memory, so I did the best I could,
And here you are with the girls with the
so the other thing, obviously I wear glasses, didn't have contacts at the time. And that stupid hood, and so I went and got dressed in the back and came out, and George thought it was the funniest thing he saw, and he started talking about a separate plot line where Boba Fett moonlights as Jabba's accountant, and then and I'm standing there like, great, George, thanks for humiliating me in front of everybody. And so we went up there. They're posing us and everything. Oh, prior to going up there, then George starts telling me what he wants Boba to do. He says just that, you pretend like you're talking to him, and just chat him up, and he says, and then when I say now, he says, I want you to reach over to Mercedes, and you stroke her cheek, and then just walk out of the shot.
That is so badass scene. That's probably Boba Fett's actually. I'm sorry to cut you off, Don. I'm just freaking out.
Okay.
That's got to be actually his coolest move in all of the shows, dude. I'm not even kidding. It's just he doesn't have to do anything. Just how you did that is freaking awesome. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm just kidding. So
no worries. So we went up there. They posed us and everything, and we're talking, and Mercedes and I'm trying to remember the other actress. I can't remember her name. That poor girl was in so much pain. They had painted her. She's got toe shoes on.
Yeah, I can see.
She was doing pointe, ballet, but the paint had restricted, because those shoes are made out of leather. They restricted the leather, and so they were tight on her feet, and her feet she had blisters, and she was so bloody. She was real uncomfortable. She probably had the best suit to wear on that day because it was so bloody hot, and she's basically wearing straps. So she's probably the coolest one on the set. But anyway, so we're up there doing the thing, and we're talking. They just started filming, talk, and George and Mercedes and this other actress are being kind of suggestive about my rocket pack and all sorts, kind of rude body kind of comments they're making, and I'm like terrified that I'm going to screw up. I'm just like, I was so uncool, I was just so like not like I'm just gonna mess this all up, and fortunately you couldn't see my face, well, except for the behind the scenes photos. So and at one point George says hey, Boba, look over here, and both Mercedes and I are like, what? And we just kind of did that, where we just looked away, and that's in the film. He just had us, we're like, what? And we were looking at him to what, I don't know what you said. And then he goes, okay, and Boba, and I knew that was my cue, and I didn't want to rub her face because she had this beautiful, hand painted makeup on her face. You could see all those purple dots and everything, and I was afraid that I would smear it, So I just decided at the last minute to touch her under the chin and walked out, and the entire place erupted in laughter. and I thought, again, I screwed up. I messed up, and my wife was there. My wife actually was a stand-in for one of the digital creatures, and uh, sh- and she was standing off, and she's laughing, and I says, "What?" I said, "What did I do? Did something happen? Did I
Yeah.
screw up? What did I do?" She goes, "No, it was cute. It's funny." And I like, okay,
Yeah.
but like I said, I was so terrified of being screwed up. I was so angst ridden that it's like it didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
So we did it again. I think we did it a second time. So I'm not sure which take is in the film, but and that's all. It was like 10 minutes. It was over. So.
Wow.
Don, I know those are some tough pants to fill, right? And
Yeah.
I know that I read your post, unfortunately, and I know that you had a good relationship with Jeremy before he passed, and what a great post that you wrote about him. I'm sure there's a big respect
Yeah.
between you two.
Yeah, no, Jeremy was a sweetheart, and we had a fun, back and forth about this. I
Yeah.
don't think I met him until after I had done this. I think the
Yeah.
first time I met him was I had already done this. So we would always joke, he's like, "You weren't menacing enough." I says, "Yeah, but I got the girls."
Yeah. You're
So,
the suave one. Yeah.
and I've got a signed photo from him that says, "Don, you are not nearly menacing enough, Jeremy."
Oh, that's so
That's
awesome.
hilarious. So, Doc, I have now, because I'm never gonna get this opportunity. Okay, I'm a big, Boba Boba Fett, fan club guy. In fact, my jetpack, I have a custom jetpack that I had done. I specifically had it done to the special editions because
With the
I
slash in
wanted,
the back.
yeah, that's they're just more scratches and
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So this helmet now, is this helmet technically the Empire Strikes Back one, just kind of more, or do you know, like, or you just grab the
I
first?
grabbed my goal when going through there, like I said, it was a 10 or 15-minute ride to the ranch from ILM. We had an hour for lunch, a 10 or 15-minute ride to the ranch, 10 or 15-minute ride back, and then I had 10 or 15 minutes or so to pull the stuff together. So my goal was, in that short amount of time, was to pull stuff that didn't have to be repaired, and a lot of stuff, the pieces had nicks that didn't belong, that were exposing fiberglass, or
Yeah,
like a helmet that the male
yeah,
slot thing, the visor thing that was missing, or something was
yeah,
broken off of it, or was bent, or so of the choices we had. So I grabbed what I perceived to be the best pieces that I could find. And also from memory, remembering, okay, yeah, obviously there's a jumpsuit, there's the gauntlets, there's the gloves, there's the mask, the helmet.
the Wookiee
Um,
blades.
the lower parts. I know there's stuff that goes in the pockets, and
Yeah,
trying to remember, and all the stuff was spread in different boxes. There wasn't
yeah.
like one. But the biggest thing was there was only 3 or 4 jetpacks there, and and
Just
pretty
three or
much
four of
all
them, dude.
uh, pretty much all of them had some sort of damage on them. If the little, and again, I didn't know how they were going to shoot this. I didn't know what we were going to see. So there was, the little bells on the bottom
Yeah.
on most of them were all cracked or chipped or whatever.
Mhm.
Or one of them, the rocket part, the missile part was missing. The
Okay.
top part
Yeah.
was broken off. So I didn't want to have to take this to ILM and then, to do this and then have to fix it.
Fix it.
So I was trying to grab whatever, and the only backpack that I was able to find that looked visually okay, was the one that it has a slash in the back, where it's like melted metal
Yeah.
with exposed wires. And at the time, I thought, oh, it's when supposedly, I guess, when Han Solo hits him. But then, the more I thought about it, is like, well, that wouldn't have done that kind of damage, right? So
Yeah.
did he get shot? And then I found out that there's apparently was a sequence. I don't know if they actually shot it, or they were intending to shoot it. That he gets hit with a lightsaber. So that's what I heard, at least.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't think they shot it, but this has a big long slash on the back of it.
Okay.
And so I was very conscious of that slash when I was walking out, and my memory is that if you're the camera, well, you are the camera, I wouldn't turn my back this way when walking out. I would kind of slide out this way. And then I watched the sequence more recently, and I turn, and you can see the slash. You can see part of the slash.
Oh, that's funny. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing.
But my memory was like, oh, I can't turn. But apparently I did. So
that's interesting. And what's so crazy about everything that you're telling us is that your decisions literally became now Star Wars
canon.
pop replica lore, right? Because now, I mean, these Boba Fett builders, they literally map out every single little scratch, every single little dent. Yeah.
That's so crazy.
What do you have?
Have you seen this book?
No, I've never seen that one.
It's self-published by Steve Coleman.
I need to get one of them.
And he goes through. He interviewed. He goes through. He gave this to me earlier this year at a convention we were at. But all the different photos. It's all stuff that he sourced. He sourced online.
Yeah.
And he talks about. He's got even some Mandalorian stuff.
Yeah. I need to find that.
Here. So then there's the special edition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole thing. Like they map out every scratch, every little paint difference. And what's crazy is that was your your choice. You went and picked up all this, and now you made some fans go nuts over
well, it's funny because when working at the archives, I wasn't really even aware of all the differences between costumes. I knew the differences between like the Vader Star Wars versus the Empire costume. There was a very obviously, just on camera, there was a very different appearance to it. And there was a couple New Hope masks of Vader there. But like the stuff like Boba, I wasn't even aware that all the different variations of stuff.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because, they were painted, when you paint it, you don't always paint it exactly the same. But so when fans would come up to me and ask me a question, it's like, well, no, it wasn't like that. And they start showing me stuff. It's like, oh, well, then you know more than I do already because I didn't even see that, and I held the stuff in my hand.
Yeah. Some people are crazy overboard. Don, I want to just ask one question, and you don't have to if you don't feel comfortable talking about it, no problem. But I just want to ask you, what are your thoughts about the new Boba Fett?
The TV show,
the new one, yeah.
I enjoyed it. I'm enjoying all the stuff that they're doing. I had said this back when before George sold the company. I think we might have been working on the prequels and just talking about with friends and stuff like that. The Star Wars universe that he created is so vast and so rich that you literally can go into any corner of it and do a story.
That's right.
And I really appreciate stuff like what Filoni in particular has done to it. I didn't follow the cartoons as much, but I've been following all the live action stuff. Yeah. And for the most part, I like it. I enjoyed it. I really liked Obi-Wan. I certainly like Mandalorian. Book of Boba Fett. There was something a little. And I think it's more from a filmmaking standpoint.
So Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah, it's almost like he didn't quite get it.
Enough said.
In my opinion, 1, but that's not to say that it's bad. I still enjoyed it, but it's like,
stylistic. There's some.
Yeah, and like I said, it's more of a filmmaking thing. I do find this with a lot of the streaming series, not only just Star Wars, but Stranger Things and other things. Yeah. They decide that they want to make 8 episodes of something, when really they probably had only enough for 7. You know, exactly. And so they stretch out story points.
The fillers.
And I remember even Mandalorian is like first few episodes like okay, he's walking again. Now he's walking.
Yeah.
He's more walking. Okay, that's what it felt like. He's always just walking.
Yeah.
But ultimately there was good payoffs and everything.
Right.
And all of them I thought had really
very well said. That was very well said. I think that like John Knoll with you could tell his history in the Star Wars world. And then when Rogue One was put together, I just think that was so beautifully done. I love that movie. But it's cool that we're able to see the live action stuff now, though.
Yeah, and I really like that. I think you and coming back to the Star Wars world, because I'm not sure that, and he probably wouldn't admit it now, I'm not sure that he had the best of times on like episode 2 or 3, maybe even. I think he was going through some personal stuff, and not that he was actually a joy to work with. Actually, they all were. That not one of them had. But I think there was kind of like, I don't think he wanted to be known as Obi-Wan. And I don't blame him, because so it's really great to see him coming back, because he's such a great, he's a great actor, but he's so likable.
And he is Obi-Wan.
He's really embodied it, and it's great to see that he's more involved in the filmmaking of it and everything. He just looks like he's having the best of time. I mean, I didn't get to interact with him at all in Celebration, but just seeing what he was doing with the fans and everything, he just loved. And Hayden was.
I mean, just this whole, and again, we talked about it early, when we were first starting this interview, but there's this new resurgence of this love for the prequels, right? Because there was a time where fans were bashing it, right? The storylines and this and that, and I think what ended up happening is this generation that grew up with the prequels now is the core fan base, right? And I think with Clone Wars, the cartoons, and the expanding on episode 3, right? Or like the gap between episode 2 and 3.
Right.
I mean, it made a huge difference. For myself too, I didn't watch the cartoons until during the pandemic, the shutdown, and I watched Clone Wars, and it just gave this new life to Darth Maul, just to the characters. It was amazing. And you got to work on the prequels, which is
it was funny because my favorite one to work on was Attack of the Clones, and as I understand it, the people that used to hate the prequels was they hate the Attack of the Clones. A lot of people felt was the weakest, and it's hard for me for the that's me playing Django that I got cut, but it's hard for me to separate like the films. I'm certainly an original trilogy guy. I go back and forth between which is my favorite, Star Wars or Empire. And I always call it Star Wars. I never call it A New Hope.
That's so cool.
And I remember all the hate that Jedi got when it came out. And then then of course I remember Phantom Menace. When I heard that I was going to be able to go to London with R2D2 for episode 1, they said you could read the script, but I had to read it in the production office. It was literally like chained to the desk.
Wow.
Had a cable to the desk. You couldn't take it out of the room. Wow. So I sit in a seat and read through it. And so when I got back to the model shop, and people were asking me, so what was it? It's like, it was so hard for me to explain the movie. I couldn't. I said, okay, well, there's these guys that they're trying to blockade the and then it was hard. It was hard for me to explain.
Yeah.
And then the same thing with Attack of the Clones. I was reading it. Actually, I the script of Attack of the Clones I thought read really well. I got a big kick out of reading that. That one I had my own copy of it, and I was able to bring that home. And you're looking through all the things, and like when I came upon the battle with Yoda and Count Dooku, the way it was said, and I'm trying to remember, I couldn't keep the scripts. They had to give them back at the end, otherwise I would have kept it, because it was so funny that it was one line of description that described the entire fight, and it was something like, Yoda moves with such an incredible speed and agility as a Jedi Knight that it's indescribable or something like that. That's how it was written in the script. And it's words to that effect. It's like, okay, so you guys don't know what you're going to do here. Is how I read that.
That's so cool.
And I remember hearing stories of like Rob Coleman and John Knoll, George was talking about, Yoda levitates, or he's on like a little floating thing, and Rob kept on talking him out of that. And anyway, so it was a ton of fun to work on. I not only on all three of them. Well, episode 1, I went to London for 6 weeks to work with R2 there. And then I came back and I worked for another year on it as a model maker. Got to make, a bunch of different models. And then episode 2 and 3, I went to Sydney, Australia for episode 2 for the entire shoot. So I was there in Sydney for 2.5 months, and then we went on location for a month. So after leaving Sydney, we went to Italy for a little over a week, I think it was.
Is that the Padme when they get married over the lookout?
Yeah.
Dude, I want to go there, Don, so bad.
Lake Como, it's gorgeous. The whole city is gorgeous.
Yeah.
That entire area. So we went up to Lake Como, which is north of Milan, and then we went to I can never remember the town where the castle is, where they filmed episode 1, and then from there we flew on a private, not a private jet, but a private charter. It was like a 707 or 737 or something. We had all to ourselves, the cast and crew, and we flew to Tunisia, and we spent about a week and a half in Tunisia.
Jeez,
and then we flew from Tunisia to Spain. Half the crew got off. I didn't get off in Spain, and they shot them arriving at the castle.
Yeah.
And then the rest of us went on to London, and then we stayed in London for another 2 weeks or something. Shooting stuff.
So Don, for the episode 1, you initially were there kind of with the model shop with R2D2 specifically. You were kind of the
So what happened was that they kind of I was already not at the archives already. I'd already left the archives, and so the people that were at the archives, they wanted all stuff to be used that was going to be used. They had them ship it. So they took all the R2s and shipped it to London. Now we had 2, we called the A unit and B unit that we used for personal appearances. So if you saw an R2 character, an R2 appear anywhere from probably Return of the Jedi, roughly Return of the Jedi, all the way until 96, 97, it was this one specific R2. Which is kind of the one that's on the 3-legged one that's on the picture. But it's really not, because what happened was, for whatever reason, the effects team that got them when they got to London, they pulled them all apart and then reassembled them. And so when I showed up, what had happened was that they were having problems, and they were a great team. They were really good, but they were having problems with George and production because George, I think, forgot that R2's has its limitations. It can't drive on sand. It can't go through doorways really well, or anything with a ledge, or there's a lot of mechanical issues, and they were shooting it particularly with Anakin's hovel, and it was a very confined set, so the operator had to be in odd spots and couldn't really see where to operate properly. So there was a lot of R2 bumping into walls and stuff like that. So I got this phone call one day at ILM, and they asked Nelson Hall and Grant Imahara, who eventually went on to Mythbusters, because the 3 of us were the ones responsible for R2 at Lucasfilm, and Rick McCallum, the producer, knew that. So we were on this conference call with him and Peter Hutchinson, who was the head of the effects team, and there might have been somebody else on. Well, anyway, we were talking about all the issues, and they're saying, "Oh, we're having this problem, we're having this problem, this problem," and I said, "Well, we were offering solutions," and finally at the end of it, Rick just said, well, here's what we're going to do. He says, we'll you guys at ILM, you build an R2, and we'll have the team here build an R2, and we'll see which one works better. Which is a really crappy thing to do to a team of people.
Yeah.
But we had 3 weeks to build an R2. So trying to see, I don't think it might be the one that's Grant's got his right hand on.
Yeah.
It's one of those. Anyway, so we brainstormed and came up with the solutions to the problems that they were having, and kind of too complicated to go into now. But anyway, we came up with one that was going to be really strong and powerful. And we had 3 weeks to pull it together. So we put about 10 people on it, and we did it. And then Rick asked, excuse me to come over and operate it. Well, now I came into this situation where I was already had a few check marks against me, because it's like, oh, the American's going to come over here and show us what we're doing wrong, you know.
Yeah.
And that was not what the situation I wanted to be in
Yeah.
whatsoever. So I kind of had to like be very political and like, you know, I'm you guys are doing a great job. I'm not, you know. And so the lead operator, I don't think he ever liked me, but the rest of the team and I got along really well.
Yeah.
And so they ended up painting my R2, the ILM R2, what we call the ILM R2. All the blue panels were yellow, and I was this, you know, I was a background R2 I think the majority of the shoot in London, except a couple of shots where it was R2. And so these are all, by the way, episode 2 and 3 photos. There's no photos from episode 1.
Those are fun.
This one was done by Annie Leibovitz for Vanity Fair.
Is that your son?
That's my son. Yeah. He's 25 years old now.
Yeah.
And he's in the film. And he's in the film business. So.
Does he remember Don?
Yeah. He remembers it. Yeah, very, very clearly. That's another reason why those films were great to me, because that was a great father-son moment that we had.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, so I did the shots there. I came back from London for episode 1, and then started working on models. And then all of a sudden, they were like, "Oh, we need this shot. We need this shot. We didn't get this shot with R2." So I was doing a lot of pickups, a lot of inserts with R2. Most of the stuff of R2 on the back of the ship while Anakin's flying, that's me. There's the sequence where an R2 has to bypass the power couplers to make the thing go to light speed, the ship go to light speed. We did all that at ILM, including doing the two to three legged version of R2, because that was actually the one that was built for the original Star Wars and then modified for Empire Strikes Back. And we got it going, and actually Grant and Adam Savage help put it together, help rebuild it so that we can make it work. Grant did a lot of the work on it, but Adam did a lot of the work on it as well. And we actually did that shot where he throws his leg out and drops it and drives off. I did that shot, and it was terrifying because that mechanism itself, Grant had put this big air canister in there, and it shot that foot out with such force it knocked me over, you know, when we were playing with it. And so it was just dangerous. It's just a dangerous little machine. It was like I said, it was just absolutely terrifying. Adam Savage talks about it on one of his tested videos. And then to put it up on the set, and it's a set that was up about 10 feet in the air, and it had a pit where all the stuff was in it. John Knoll kept asking me to be closer and closer to the pit. So I was just terrified that it was going to throw its leg out, hit the thing, and go right into the pit. And then I had to turn it around and drive it out of the shot. And of course, not drive it off the set, because we only built so much of the set. So it was just a terrifying shot. And I think we did 2 or 3 times, but fortunately I didn't crash it.
That 323. I mean, obviously following the R2 builders and all that. I mean, what some of those guys have done with that mechanism, and it's scary just because obviously the face planning is the most common thing to happen.
Well, this only went from 2 to 3. It went from 3 to 2, but it would fall over.
It would fall
so
over.
You would have to reset it by holding it and bring it back.
Oh,
so,
gotcha.
So when you do see it go from 3 to 2, that's cheated. It's on wires. They shot that in London. But when it pops up at the top of the thing, it's only shot in Empire Strikes in Phantom Menace where it's digital, where it's at the top of the ship. It drives down and it stops and it brings its third leg in. That's all digital, and then from the rest of the sequence, it's real R2s.
Real. So. Now, Don, I have a question. And this is when we'll get right back to it. All right. There's this whole thing about the hypo blue, right? Now, did you guys kind of use the same process for the prequels?
Well, I created the hypo blue.
You created the hypo blue.
Yeah. So, well, actually, myself and Nelson Hall. So the reason it's called hypo blue is because So when I have to go back. See, you get me talking, and we're going to be here for the next 5 hours.
Oh man, I don't care. That's good.
When in '99 or so, I was talking to the Star Wars Fan Club magazine, and I wanted to propose a story about the history of R2, and talk about everything that had been done up until that point. I think it was right at 99, maybe it was 98 or something. It was right between episode 1 and episode 2, I know. And so I was asking some friends that didn't work at ILM, and there's this one guy was telling me about, there's this group of R2 people build R2s, and again, internet wasn't that popular at that point, but there's this internet group, and I can't remember exactly, but it was like he was talking about it, but he was talking about it in vague terms, and it almost kind of like he was holding some information. Anyway, I eventually discovered the R2 Builders group, and Dave Everett, who was out of Sydney, Australia, who founded the R2 Builders group, and I started connecting. We connected and we started talking. And I have always a strong connection with Australia because my wife's Australian. And so we talked, and Dave was a great guy. And so I found that I joined the group and everything. And at that point, they were talking to a guy named Tony Dyson. And Tony was he built the bodies. That's literally all he did for Empire Strikes Back. He built the bodies for Empire Strikes Back of R2-D2 because he owned a toy company that they specialize in fiberglass molding. So all those bodies, and they're beautifully done. The Empire Strikes Back one. He kind of went on years later and kind of really bragged about, kind of made, his contributions a little exaggerated, let's put it that. But from what I know about the history of it, and I know the team that actually worked on Empire Strikes Back, the effects team, they were the ones responsible for it, and Tony just provided castings. Anyway, he was talking to the R2 builders, and he was offering, like, for a fee that he would give them information. And at the R2 builders, and so they were just about to, or they might have done it. I can't remember, but I saw that, and I was talking to Dave. I said, I could tell you anything you want to know about R2 that I know, and for free, because I think that's really crappy. I always believed that again, growing up doing the makeup stuff, Dick Smith, the makeup artist, he gave his information out freely because he worked in a situation where the union people that he was working with were holding the information because they didn't want competition, right? So he vowed never to do that to anybody. So if you asked him a question, he'd tell you exactly how he did it. It wasn't a secret. So he demystified all that stuff, created an amazing generation of makeup artists because of it. And he eventually put together, because he kept on getting so many requests, he put together a course in makeup that was kind of expensive to buy, but he was sharing freely the information. Anyway, I vowed that if I ever had any information anybody needed, I would give it away for free. It maybe doesn't benefit my pocketbook, but I just thought it was the right thing to do. So I
Comes
told
out.
everybody at the R2 builder. So we did like chats, online chats, and we started getting really connected. And then because they had more information, there was a lot of misinformation about the sizes of stuff and this and that and the other thing. I had measured an R2 for my own purposes, and I made essentially blueprints, and they somehow found their way into the hands of the R2 builders. I don't know how they did it, but somehow
That's cool.
they got their way into the R2 hands. And so that's what they based all of their future builds off of. Again, they've changed it quite a bit. Anyway, getting to the hypo blue. So when the episode 1 started, and I went over to London, I was really disappointed. They basically painted R2. The blue was like flat royal blue paint. It was almost looked like house paint to me.
No,
and
that's so cool, Gabe.
And they didn't have any. There was no depth to the thing, and there was a few samples in the archives from the original paint job. You know what R2 looked like, and the thing was the original R2. A lot of it was aluminum. So one of the things that it always looked like to me was die-chem, which is a metal marking, and the only thing about die-chem, it's really fragile. It scratches, which is what it's supposed to do. So I figured, well, if you painted it with die-chem and then put clear coat or something over it, might help. So we tried. So the point being is that for episode 2, when I knew that I was going to be heading up the droid department, I wanted to restore all the R2s to that as original blue that you saw in Star Wars. And I made an appointment with Doug Chang because he was kind of overseeing that kind of stuff at that point. And I came out to the ranch and proposed it to George, and he's like, yeah, he didn't care. He's like, yeah, sure. So I was showing him the difference. I said, it's just, and the fans would love it. And, yeah, whatever. Okay, that's fine. So
so cool.
So we started experimenting, and the first thing, of course, we tried was die-chem. Well, we couldn't just quite get it right. It just didn't. It still didn't look right. And the problem with that blue is because there's so much translucency to it. There's such depth to it, and the lighting conditions change. If you're inside, it looks totally different than it looks outside in bright sunlight versus shadow versus stage lighting. And because it's on a compound curved surface, the light fall off is different. So it's really, really hard to gauge what that is. And of course, film stock is different from digital and this and that. Anyway, we were having a heck of a time. And it was a big debate among the team of us that were trying to do this. And so Nelson Hall was tasked with trying different things. And we always thought that, well, if it's not die-chem, then what was really popular in the 70s was candy apple colors. And candy apple was, where you'd put a base coat of one color and then you'd put a clear coat with in this case, blue over it. So you'd have that depth of color. So we played around with some candy apple colors. Yeah. And then it just ultimately came down to what looks right. That's what looks the best to the eye. We're not going to nail it. We were running out of time. We didn't have the luxury of like an R2 builders where we could just keep experimenting. We had, a 3 or 4 days really to try to figure this out because we needed to paint all the R2s. And there was, as you saw in the picture, there were, I think 9 bodies and something like 8 heads or something like that. Yeah.
It's funny. Gabe's brought up this paint thing, and finally you hear it from the master himself. That's really funny.
I know.
So anyway, so we eventually settled on a color that there was a general consensus among the group of us what looked right. Yeah. And that's what we ended up using. And the reason they call it hypo blue is after I did it, and I was obviously under NDAs and stuff, and I couldn't talk about my work as during production of episode 2, but the blue was always a constant source of discussion on the thing. And I says, well, let's put it this way. And I wrote out a thing. I says, if I were to paint an R2, say it's a hypothetical situation, hence the word hypo.
Hypo.
A hypothetical situation, I would use this color with this color base and this color clear coat in these proportions, and that's what I
cool.
would use.
That's
It
cool.
hypothetically,
Yeah.
and
cool.
that's the color that
That's
now interestingly, since that, Chris Reef, who's an artist and has an amazing R2, he's one of the R2 builders. He lives, I think, in Ohio. He did the diechem route and he nailed it. And so I'm pretty much 100% sure that the original
It's
R2s
diechem.
were diechem. I think for Empire Strikes Back they used actual car paints, but for Star Wars they were diechem. Because
Yeah.
you look on the film, even the way it's shot, diechem doesn't blend very nicely. It's got, there's like not so much drips, but there's like if you put it on too heavy, it's darker than it is in other spots, and it just looks to me like diechem. So, and it is.
That I mean, I tried to do so much research. I ended up just going the easy route, and I just went with the Ford blue.
That's actually a really good blue. That's spray out of the spray can.
Yeah. And that's how I did mine. But
yeah, no, it looks great. And it's just, the thing is that depending on the lighting situation, they all look okay. It's you just don't want too, red of a blue or too light of a blue. As long as you got a nice like rich blue.
Yeah.
Particularly if you put a clear coat on it, it gets a nice level of detail.
So I want to go through some of these pictures. Speaking of R2 and speaking of this hypo blue. So there's you. Actually, let me go back to this one and point out. So obviously the one that we see on the right, that's the Kenny Baker one, right? Because you could see the holes on the bottom where his legs would go, and then obviously that's the normal one.
Yeah, that. So we had a series of. We only had 2 R2s that were for Kenny, and when we shot again, when we were going to Sydney for episode 2, I was just assuming Kenny was going to be there, and they never brought him over.
Oh,
and so we had 2 Kenny R2s. This one, I'm pretty sure this is the aluminum one. Yeah, that's the aluminum one, and you could tell by in the doors have little hinges. You could see the hinges on it.
Oh.
And then there's a fiberglass version. And interestingly, the fiberglass version is in the Academy Museum in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. I just saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had those 2. And I posted just recently a picture of Nathan Hamill, Mark Hamill's son. If you go on my Instagram account, there's a picture of Nathan Hamill as a young kid in an R2, and then I did a similar picture. I didn't know that Nathan had done that at the time. There's a picture of my kid in R2, and I think they're in the exact same units. Oddly enough, 20 some years apart.
So cool. I mean, I'm gonna.
And I know the one my kid is the one that's in Australia, in the museum. So anyway, so we had the 2 Kenny units. The only time Kenny's in episode 2 is for the wedding scene. That's the only time we did that, and we ended up not shooting it in Como. We shot that against green screen in London at Ealing Studios, and it happened to be on my 40th birthday. It was the last day of shooting. It was my 40th birthday.
Yeah, I got that.
And
I'm gonna bring up that picture just really quick.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the same R2 that they're both in.
Wow.
22 years apart or whatever it was.
Those are great shots.
Nathan would have been in there in 81, and my son was in there in 2003. So.
Wow, that's amazing.
But the one that my kid is in is the one that's in the museum.
The museum.
So so then the R2s, the other R2s, the 3-legged ones, we had. I kind of had a set for, if you go to the one with the group shot of us, that we had different 3-legged ones for different. There was the one that we called the R2, the R2 version, the ILM version. That one was a very, very precise, slower R2, and I use that a lot especially for driving and being very precise in my driving. Whereas we had one that's a little faster, so if they had to be running or something, so we had those. And the other ones were kind of just backups, And I knew that we would be using R2s in, as other R2s, so they'd have to be colored differently. So we took vinyl and we would take an R2 and put vinyl over different colors,
To
and
change.
that's how we change it. And that way we didn't have to repaint it
Yeah.
every time.
Huh.
But in that, oh sorry, if you go back to
Oh, yeah.
that group shot,
Of course.
the R2 that's in the very front, on the right, the two-legged,
Mhm.
that's the one that's in that shot with me, and the one that's right behind him is the fiberglass one, which is the one that, like I said, that my son is in. And those are the team that were from ILM that we did did all the restoration. So
Yeah.
myself on the left, the tall guy between Grant and I is Scott McNamara, who's an amazing machinist and engineer. Of course, behind Grant in the white shirt is Nelson Hall, who my partner in crime on a lot of things, and then Preston Donovan and Eric Jensen on the right.
Wow.
So, and they provided like molding and other
Yeah.
services.
That is such a cool character. That
Yeah.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Now, Don, without, and this is just kind of my observation. Is it generally the way to tell if it's a fiberglass or if they're panels? I kind of could tell that some of the panels are a little bit rounder. Like, they have like a rounder depth to it. That would make them
That's one of the ways. Yeah, the biggest one is the aluminum. Well, in person you could tell almost immediately, I think,
Mhm.
because they just look ricketier. I mean, the aluminum is only, I think it's 2 layers of like 060 aluminum, so there's not a whole lot to them. And it's interesting, the R2 builders, they'll build frames and they do all this other stuff. None of these R2s have frames in them.
Wow, it's just the aluminum.
Yeah, it's just the aluminum, the fiberglass shell, and they're just bolted onto for the fiberglass.
Yeah.
They just bolt on the shell. I actually snapped the leg during episode 2
Wow.
when we were rehearsing something.
Yeah.
It was on an incline, and I tried to turn, and the wheel dug in,
Yeah.
and the leg just snapped in half.
Yeah.
And so we fixed it, but that one was out for a while.
Mine is hand scored styrene.
Oh yeah,
I hand scored all the 2 layers on
skin and everything.
that was
that's a really good solution as opposite to the fiberglass. This is the R2, the ILM R2.
Okay.
So this is the one that we built at ILM. And the way you could tell in the skirt, in the middle of the skirt, the little dot, and it was a camera. We had a camera there.
Oh, I didn't know.
For episode 1, because again, one of the problems that was this R2 is built to resolve a series of issues that they were having during the filming of episode 1, and one of them was if they can't get into the set, how are you going to see to operate? Mm-hmm. So we thought, well, let's put a camera in R2. Well, the most obvious place to put it is the big blue eye, but what the problem was, you could minimize that a little bit by having it on an angle so that it's not shooting up. We did put it in the eye. The problem is that if you turn the head, then you don't know where you are relative to center. So you could turn the head, but then you might think it's straight, but it might be off center, and then you're going in a different direction. So it had to be on a fixed point, and at least for me, it had to be. Yeah. And we put it in the skirt, and I figured no one's going to see a little black hole there. Yeah. And we stuck it in there, drove it all over ILM, and it was great. I could be a few hundred feet away from it, and I could drive it all around, and no one see me. We never used it.
Oh,
so we never used it for shooting. Yeah, so we never had the situation where we needed it. Yeah. And then for episode 2, I just pulled it out because it was in the way.
Yeah. Man, that is such a cool story.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, my team from the two of the 3 people are on my team. Justin Dix in the back. Justin and I painted the C-3PO for episode 2, the multicolored C-3PO.
Yeah,
cool. And then that's Matt Sloan on the kneeling down, and he played Plo Koon in episodes 2 and 3.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So then there's this one.
Yeah, that was Archie's last day of shooting on episode 3.
Wow.
And we were shooting the scene where they're trying to rescue the Emperor, and that's a fiberglass. That's not the ILM R2. It's the speedier R2 because he had to run with them. But it was so funny because Ewan was very concerned about the the behind the scenes photos, people taking behind the scenes photos. They were part of Lucasfilm. It wasn't like they were paparazzi or something
Yeah.
like that. But somehow he got in his mind that they were, and they were intruding upon his. And so, like I said, he's a great guy. He's a nice guy. I don't want to say anything bad about him, but the photographers were like warned that when Ewan's on the set, stay back, take photos from afar. So the guy that was taking photos at that point on Return of the Jedi, on Revenge of the Sith, was a guy named Ralph Nelson. And Ralph goes way, way, way back. Matter of fact, he worked on Return of the Jedi as a unit photographer, but he was on Back to the Future. He told some great stories. There was another guy, now I can't remember his name, that worked on Episode 2. That had worked with Kubrick on 2001. So he told some great stories. Anyway, I went up to Ralph and I said, this being R2's last day, I said, would you mind taking a photo of the cast and George and I for, as last day? And he said, he kind of laughed and he said, I'd be happy to. He says, but Ewan will never go for it. Yeah. I said, well, if I ask him, and he says, yeah, would you? He says, yeah, of course. If he says, yeah, he says, I'll of course take your photo. So I went up to you and I says, hey, it's R2's last day. Do you mind getting a photo with him? He said, yeah, sure, no problem. So that's how we got the
heck,
photo.
George is there. Hey, Don, I'm sorry, Don, I just want to ask real quick. We are very blessed to have industry guests as yourself. And I like to ask a lot of you guys that have been on our show that have had the great opportunity to work aside George Lucas. Do you have some great, obviously you were around him quite a bit. Do you have some really cool, something that stands out, a story of you and George or conversation?
Yeah, there's a number of them. I mean,
I'm sure.
Not like we were good friends or anything like that. What's kind of cool is that, so when we were at the ranch, Grant and Imahara, Grant started out at the ranch, and Nelson Hall and I, and the three of us were like the three amigos, right? And we had this kind of running joke. It was actually inspired by Grant, that George, like, kind of didn't really know everybody's name. It was just a joke thing. It wasn't true whatsoever. But we had this running joke that George would, like, not remember everybody. He knew the people, but they didn't quite know them, Mm-hmm. So we had this joke that, we all had, I was Dan instead of Don, and Nelson was Nathan, Grant was Graham. And so Grant would do this like George Lucas impersonation. He was great at impersonation. He'd go, hey Dan, how's R2 doing? And so it's like he would kind of know you, but he doesn't really know you, right? Yeah. So, matter of fact, Grant and I were doing the impersonation of him with him behind us one day. But this was at the ranch. So there was kind of like a mystique of George that at the ranch you kind of, not to this extreme, but don't make eye contact. You don't.
We've heard that.
And that wasn't. I don't know where that came from. That it might have been just someone paranoid thinking that someone's gonna fanboy out at him. Yeah. And I'm sure it happened. I'm sure it did happen. And he's not that kind of guy. He doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't sit well with him. So, but when we were on location, and he was much more relaxed about stuff, and you certainly could go up to him and talk to him and ask him questions. And there was a couple of times where I went up to Rick McCallum. I said, he said, just go ask George, and so you just go up, hey George, what about that? Yeah, that's fine, whatever. So kind of like the R2 Blue, and so going back to this joke about that he didn't know who we were, I obviously he would recognize me because he'd see my face, every day or so. So obviously he would recognize me. But we were in London doing pickups for episode 2, and I was hearing in the distance they're talking about a shot with R2, and the assistant director says, or George says, oh well, let's ask, and he goes, Don Bies. He knew my whole freaking name, And I'm thinking at that point, it's like, okay, so Grant was wrong about that. that old joke.
That is so
He
cool.
knows more than we think he knows.
Yeah.
So that was fun. But the other one was another story was we were doing. I had gotten to Australia before he did for episode 2. He was still in the States. I got there about a week or so before he did. So I was setting up my shop. I had to hire a crew of people, and when he came, there it was going to be like another week or so before shooting started. When he came, everyone was like setting up appointments with him to show him things on how, something that he needed to see or buy off on or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ones was that they wanted to show him how the computer interface arm went into the socket on the Queen ship, the one that they fly to Tatooine on.
Mm-hmm.
And actually any of the sockets, but I think that's the only time it's used in the film. And apparently there was an issue on the original films because it was just Kenny Baker trying to aim and stick the thing into a socket. So I worked with a machinist that was in the props or special effects department. Actually, the props department had made the interface, the socket part.
Mm-hmm.
We had these guys make arm for us, and then he machined a thing that would come down. And I don't think it was it wasn't driven by a motor. It was just you would just take it with your hand, swing it down, and push it forward. But we made it so that it was adjustable, so that we could line it up exactly with that socket. Mm-hmm. So R2 could roll up, and then you just shoot the insert of him putting the thing in. So we had to show George this. And we're all really proud of this thing. Set it up and show it to him. He goes, "Oh, that's great." Anyway, so I've got this other question about it, and it's like it blew that one off.
So yes or no?
Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, that's great." And that's the highest compliment you can get out of George is that, yeah, great. So he starts going in, and he says, "Okay, the Obi," and I read the script, by the way, at this point. He goes, "Obi-Wan has his droid." I said, "Oh yeah, R4." He goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Now, and I knew about the different head styles, mm-hmm. right? This is an R2 style head, R4 is a different style head." I said, "Yeah, R4." I said, that's the one that head shape is like it looks like a lampshade." Yeah. And we had one. We had made one. He goes, "Oh," he said, I don't want to use that one." I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "Well," I said, "What's really cool?" I said, "I always like the R3 style. It's the clear dome, with the mechanic." And we had one of those too, right? Yeah. We made these in preparation for the film, just to have more in the background. And he goes, "Oh," he's not. "I don't want to use that one either." I said, "Okay." And then he goes, "Can't we just take an R2 head and paint it?" and I go, and I it's like it was one of those moments, and like I said, "We can do whatever you want, George." And
it's the red one, right?
Yeah. And I says, "What color do you want?" He goes, "Let's make it red." I said, "Okay, so all the parts that are blue, you want red?" He goes, "No, let's mix it up." He says, "Put all the parts that are silver red and put all the parts that are blue silver." I said, "Okay." And so that's how R4 came along.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's great stories, man.
I mean, yeah, those are, I mean, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Another amusing one was on the very first day of shooting for me. It was the third day of shooting for the film for episode 2. We're setting up. It's the scene where they're arriving on Tatooine, and they've got C-3PO and R2 in tow. And they're arriving on Geonosis, and so Padme and Anakin discuss, and then they leave, and then R2 and 3PO R2 decides to follow them, and goes out the door. Anyway. And so we're setting up, we're getting in there, and it's Anthony Daniels' first day shooting as C-3PO in his new actually an Empire Strikes Back era costume that we painted, and R2, and and I'm walking. I'm on the set, and Tony hands me some papers, and I said, "What's this?" He says, "Oh," he says, "Give these to George." I said, "What is this?" He says, "It's my rewrites." Like,
Oh shit.
I really, I and I walked out. I was leaving, as he did this as I was walking out of the set to go, because the set was raised and you had to go downstairs and everything. And so I'm holding this pieces of paper, like I'm holding this, and George is walking up the stairs as I'm walking down, and I go, "Here," and he goes, "What is this?" I says, "It's Tony's rewrites." He goes, and so then a few weeks later, we would always go in and block George would come in with the cameraman and whoever's key, the actors and me as R2 we would block out the action where he would want the characters to be.
Is that what he's standing on, Don? Right there in that picture, that little gold like taped down on the floor. Is that his marker?
That's his mark. Yeah, They made a special gold one for him to.
That's funny.
He got a big kick out of that. But we were setting up blocking the scene in the Lars garage, Owen Lars's, or the Lars Homestead garage, and it was going to be the scene where C-3PO gets the cladding put on, because originally C-3PO was the pot.
That's so cool.
And we were blocking it, and it was the end of the day, and we were blocking it for the next day. So George is like, "Yeah, so Padme, you'll be over here," and C3. And I was there for Tony because Tony had left for the day, and I just I was making sure that there wasn't going to be any issues walking downstairs, whatever, and he says, and C3PO will be here, and they'll do their dialogue, and C3PO will say this, and I says, or whatever Tony wants to say because of his rewrites. And George goes, "Let me tell you something." He says, "He can say whatever he wants when we're shooting." He says, "because his mouth doesn't move." He says, but when we go and do his lines for voiceover, he says, "I'll make him say what I want him to say."
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. So this picture right here this is that episode 2? 3.
Yeah,
okay, so this is episode 3. Got it. Okay.
Yeah, this is one of the. It's not the last. It's C-3PO and R2's last shot of the film.
Oh, okay.
But I have no idea what George is doing, but we're all laughing, obviously, or not amused, maybe.
Yeah.
But
Anthony looks tired there. He's like,
it was the end of the day, and I don't think he had been shooting all day, but we were tired. The other thing is that Rick McCallum felt we weren't moving fast enough, so I think probably moments before this photo was taken, right on the other side of that door, Rick was probably yelling at me and Justin, who's behind Tony, saying, "You got to get him in the costume quicker." So, so there was probably a little bit of a gloom over the set.
Man, that's so cool. So you're literally the droid wrangler. I mean,
for sure.
That when we had when the time for the credits came, how they wanted our names in the credits and stuff like that, I specifically asked. I'm not in the ILM credits. I'm specifically listed as R2 operator droid unit supervisor or something like that.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. And look at this cool shot. I mean, this is such an awesome shot.
The funny thing about the R2, and I've got a picture somewhere of it from straight on, his feet are dangling out of the bottom of the
I was going to ask you, is that scale, or is it, a half body, or is that a whole?
No, it was a full body. We ended up putting a body that looked good from just the top up and didn't have any feet on it, just because it was lighter and we could drop it in there.
For sure.
But we had it was it was
Yeah.
every one of the ships had an issue with an R2. Matter of fact, episode 2, the R4,
Mhm.
there was a sequence that was cut from the film. It was never filmed, but it was in the script where R4 climbs out of the ship and gets attacked by one of the Geonosis creatures.
Oh.
And I had requested, because I said, you know, a real R2 wouldn't fit in that ship. I said, could we make a redesign, a smaller, like a truncated R2
Mhm.
body, and build that and shoot that?
Mhm.
That would be cool.
And they said, yeah. I think I asked Rick McCallum, and maybe I asked George. I can't recall. Anyway, they said, yeah. So we sketched up some ideas, and we came up. We were tossing the idea around, and then and we were going to do it in Sydney. We were going to start building in Sydney, and then one thing led to another. We were busy, and then it's like, you know what? We're not going to shoot it now. We'll shoot it at ILM. We'll shoot that sequence at ILM, so you can build it at ILM. And then they cut it, so we never built it.
Oh,
So your idea was to build like a dwarf
Yeah.
R2 unit.
Yeah, it would have looked essentially the same, but the body would have been half the size, half the.
That would have been really freaking cool. I'm surprised an R2 builder hasn't done anything
They
like
did.
that.
They did.
Yeah, I told the story to the R2 builders at the time, and
There you go. Because I'm thinking right now, that's so
Yeah.
awesome.
and one of the guys built it, and it was at whatever the celebration was for 2005. Yeah.
How did it look? Did it look?
It looked good. He came up with his own design. It wasn't what we would have designed, but it was it was a cute idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Look at this. Now here's a question for you, Don. Buttons in the front, buttons in the back.
They're all over the place. They're
Right.
literally all over the place. Yeah.
So Michael, that's one of the things that the R2 builder is always like, okay, do the buttons go, on the horseshoe? Do they go on the front or on the back? There's some that are switched on each leg. It's
Yeah, all the ones we had, they were mirror versions of each other. There wasn't like the other leg doesn't have the buttons on the front. They're literally the mirror version of them. But
I think that's how
they were literally all over the place.
Yeah, that's how I did mine. One of them's in the front and one's in the back.
Yeah.
Now, Don, I'm not going to badmouth the prequels by any means, but I just want you to know that one thing that I don't know why somebody didn't go up to George and say, George, bro, and I'm wondering why you didn't do this, Don. Why are we going to have R2 fly? I mean, R2 cannot fly, dude. I mean,
those thrusters. Have you seen the R2 builders made the thrusters and they come out and it's like
the guy that actually did that digitally is a good friend, Billy Brooks. And,
I love that idea, by the way. I think it's a fantastic.
The idea was
I guess they didn't work when he was in the.
Well, there's a whole story we came up with about that, but the idea of R2 flying was goes back to episode 1, and there's actually a sequence in episode 1 where he flew. There's that it's either the blooper reel or it's in the web series where they're doing behind the scenes stuff. And it's called Bad Droid Karma, and you see an R2 like fall off the edge of a landing platform, and that was a shot. I wasn't involved in it, but that was a shot that they did, and the idea was R2 was goofing around with Anakin on the landing platform, and like fell back, and Anakin's like R2, and then all of a sudden you see R2 fly up and come and land, and and the rockets came out of the bodies.
Right.
The long doors. Each of the 4 long doors, all of them were opened up, and a little like booster rocket came out on an arm, and that's how it flew. I don't recall that they actually built the little rocket things, but they did have R2 on the wires and dropped them off the side of this thing. And it was before I was there shooting, so I wasn't witnessing it. So the idea is obviously got cut from the film, and then they had the idea to come back, and it was Billy that suggested the R2s come out of the boosters come out of the arms, because then he could pitch and do all sorts of stuff. And there's a lot of character in it and what he did. So I mentioned earlier that there was a one digital shot of R2 in episode 1 when he comes to the top of the Queen ship and drives down to fix the power converters or whatever they are. In episode 2, there were about 20 shots, maybe 20, 22 shots or something that were digital. Obviously, most of them were flying, but there's a couple shots where R2 is jumping downstairs, climbing downstairs. And also when Anakin and Padme are walking in the big plaza that was shot in Seville, Spain, that's a digital R2 back there because I wasn't there for that.
Oh wow,
That's crazy.
But then all the other stuff is me.
it's you. That's so cool.
And then in episode 3, roughly about half the shots of R2 are digital.
Wow, it's just so cool. You can go through. Sorry, let me get this picture back.
This
up.
was, by the way, this picture was. I think this was either the first or second day of shooting for episode 3.
Oh,
Shot.
And it was actually part of a sequence that all got cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the C-3PO puppet. That's Michael Lynch who's behind it,
Yeah.
operating it, and that's done in the Japanese style puppetry called bunraku. So he's attached to it as key points, and so when he moves his body and his head, that does the same thing.
Yeah.
I built the head, and he's got a little heart motor that spins around. I built that.
Oh, huh.
And then that's me. We were shooting a pickup for episode 1. I think I think it might have been at the pottery. I can't remember what this was. I'm actually just there for an eye line, and I'm giving Michael help.
Oh.
So.
And then in this picture you're helping.
Yeah, that was actually Tony's last day of shooting, and technically my last day of shooting episode 3. That was when he's flying off with Padme to Mustafar.
Oh, okay.
And there wasn't a ship; there was a chair. So,
Don, what was it like working with Tony?
We get along great. We had a great time together. We particularly again in episode 2, we had a lot of fun working together. We got to go to Tunisia, and it was fun to see his recollections of the time there during episode, the original film.
Yeah.
And we had a really wonderful dinner one night after. I don't think we were shooting that day. We just went out to dinner together and chatted about everything, life and everything. So yeah, I got to see him at Celebration. Got to say hi to him.
Oh, very cool.
That's
very
cool.
And he gave me a signed copy of his audio book. He gave me a signed copy of his audio book.
Oh,
I already had the. He says, "I hope you have my book." I says, "Yes, of course I have your book." I says, "I would like to get an autographed copy of it one day." He said, "Well, let me give you do you have the audio version?" I said, "No, I don't have that." He said, "Let me give you that." So he's like,
oh man,
That's cool.
And then this picture is are these are you said are these pickup shots or they're just
No, this was for episode 3, and it was the cover of Vanity Fair.
Oh, that's okay.
And so Annie Leibovitz was taking a photo. She was there for 2 or 3 weeks actually, and the big thing she was going to shoot, which we knew she was going to shoot the cover, and then we asked her on this day because my crew was there because we had Tony is dressed up as C-3PO and we had R2 there, so I didn't have a big crew. It was only 4 of us, so the entire crew was there, and I went up to her because I actually met Annie Leibovitz several times, and she remembered me, which was really cute.
That's cool.
And the first time was at the ranch, and they were doing a big photo shoot with with Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, and I think that was it. And Brian De Palma was the fifth one. And they were looking for a location to shoot it in, and I was at the archives at that time, and so this would have been the early '90s or so. And they were looking for a location to shoot this picture in, and they came through the archives thinking, well, maybe we could shoot it here, and it wasn't appropriate, for those 5 guys. So, but they introduced me to her, and what was really cool, I've met a lot of famous people over the years, but the next day she saw me at lunch. Not we weren't having lunch together, but we were at the same place. She saw me and she said, "Hello, Don," which was really great. And
Yeah.
I can't remember names, I forget my own kids' names, but the fact that she remembered my name from that
Yeah.
one, from just brief meeting the day before. And then several years later, we were at episode 2. We were shooting in Italy at the Lake Como,
Mhm.
and I had to go down. We had a base camp where all the stuff was at, because all the stuff couldn't come up to the house where we were shooting. So I had to get a ride down to that base camp, look through a crate, and then get a ride back up. And I was waiting for the van to come back and pick me up, and there's Lynn Hale, who was the head of publicity at the time, and Annie Leibovitz and her producer, and so I knew Lynn, of course, and well, of course I knew Annie, and Lynn reintroduced me to. She says, "Oh yeah, I remember you from the archives." So she remembered me after 10 years or so.
Funny.
So then we got to London for episode 2, and they were doing she was doing a bunch of stuff for Vanity Fair, and they wanted to shoot an R2. So I got the R2, and I had pulled it. I opened the crate. It was still in its crate because we weren't shooting with it, and I pulled it over to her, and she was looking at it, and she says, "Oh," she said, "I think we're going to leave it in the crate." I said, "Okay." So I was just leaning on the crate, I was waiting, and
Yeah.
she was setting something else up, and she turned around. She says, "Remember that pose?" I said, "Oh, okay." And so I was going to ask her if she wouldn't mind taking one photo of me, right?
Yeah.
Well, what she ended up doing was, after she took the photo of R2, which is actually in her book, and a print of it went on sale a few years ago and sold for something like $37,000.
Oh wow.
Um, she had me jump in, and she took a whole series of photos of me, and then she sent me the copy. I've got it. I can't see it. It's up on my wall right behind this is where my camera is. And this is a picture. She signed it and sent it to me.
Oh, that's so cool.
So that was real cute. So we got to all this for this story. That we went to do this. Lynn Hale asked me, because she knew I was Boba Fett. She says, "Would you fit into the Django costume?" Because we
Yeah.
wanted to put Django on the cover of Vanity Fair. And we're doing this with all the characters and the actors with some of the characters. And I said, "Yeah, I could try." And that's when I found out that Tamara Morrison is a little shorter than me, and so the jumpsuit. I had a little problem in the crotch area. Let's put it that way. It was a little on the tight side. Um, and so, but I obviously fit into it, and um, so we did this shoot, this setup, and then I was going to ask her if our crew could get a photo together, if she could just quickly snap a photo together.
That's
And
cool.
I said, she says, no, she says, we're coming back next week, and we're gonna go around and do all the crews.
Oh wow.
I said, oh, cool.
That it never happened.
No, so we did. That's
Oh.
what that other photo is of me with my son.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So this was the cover. This was a wild day because it's Christopher Lee, who is the only person I've ever gotten starstruck around, because I was a huge, obviously, going back to the original, how many hours ago there was when we started this.
I know, right? The Hammer films and all that.
Yeah, I was a big. He terrified me as a kid,
Yeah.
and so he was the only guy actor I've really been starstruck around, and I asked Rob Coleman, who's the animation supervisor, who was showing him around. I said, "You got to introduce me. You got to introduce me." And so he did, and he goes, I says, "It's such a pleasure to meet you." I says, "You terrified me as a child." He goes, "Ah, 'twas only fairy tales, my boy." And he was such a nice man. And then Ben Burt and I are well, know each other quite well. And Ben's an old movie fan as well. And Ben and I were having lunch one day at the canteen at at Fox Studios, and Christopher Lee comes in, has a buffet, grabs his food, goes and sits down, and he's sitting at this table all by himself. No one's talking to him. And I turned to Ben. I says, Christopher Lee's eating by himself. He goes, that's not right. I says, let's go have lunch with him. And he goes, okay. And so we went over. And then we heard these great stories from Christopher Lee, talking about
this alone is a great story.
Well, he talks about, he says, see this finger? Or maybe it was this finger, I can't remember. It's all crooked. And he says, Errol Flynn almost chopped that finger off. He goes on to talk about one of his earliest films he was in, and he was having a sword fight with Errol Flynn, and they were shooting the first part of it before lunch. Broke for lunch, came back. Errol Flynn was drunk, coming back after lunch and slashing around and missed and literally almost amputated his finger. So.
That's crazy.
Christopher Lee is one of my. I mean, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee. And Vincent Price, right? Like they're the three like hammer. In fact, I actually have Peter Cushing tattooed on my arm. But Christopher Lee, like a lot of people don't know, he loved like heavy metal.
Yeah,
he has his own album where he's just playing heavy metal.
Yeah,
and he was older already, and literally like shredding on the guitar and this like super hardcore metal like. He's just literally the most interesting man in the world, right? Like
he was fascinating. I mean, he was related to Ian Fleming.
That's right. Yeah, I remember that.
It was his cousin or something like that.
Which is
it's funny because we did that film series called R2-D2 Beneath a Dome, right?
Yeah.
And that was originally my idea, and I was co-directing it. And I wanted to get Christopher Lee to talk about. One of the problems we were having is because they were just the behind the scenes crew was just filming the different actors talking, and the easiest, funniest thing to do is talk about how lousy of a person R2-D2 is, right? And so there was all this footage we have of everyone talking about how bad, R2, he comes in drunk, or R2, whatever. And so there's all this negative stuff. So we wanted to try to inject some more positive stuff because everyone was just making stuff up. There was no script. They were just making stuff up. And so when we got to go to London, by the time we were doing the pickups in London and Christopher Lee was going to be there, I asked him, I can't remember if I asked him directly or through Lynn Hale or whatever. Anyway, we wanted to do this. And I said, in particular, he was one actor that really enjoyed working with R2. Mm-hmm. So that was that's all his direction he got. Yeah. So we were going to shoot the thing, and I went and got him, and we were walking to the thing, and I would say, hey, so how you doing today? And he goes, I'm just so exhausted. He says, I'm not a young man anymore. At that point he was like 80 or something. Yeah. And he said, I'm not a young man anymore, and they have me such early calls, to come in. And he says, of course I don't mind the work. He says, but it's just hard for me to, get up that early and come in. Mm-hmm. I said, oh, well, why don't you just ask to come in, have a later call? He says, oh, I could never do that. And I thought, oh, well, yeah, it's like a different time. Now a younger actor would just say, I'm not doing that, Yeah. But he's from those days where you had to listen to what you were told,
Yeah. No.
And then he did this. He went on for 20 minutes. It was fascinating. I think the only question was like, how did you like working with R2? And then he launched into a 20-minute monologue, and it went all over the place. I likened it to like holding a balloon and it started to float off, and you had to grab it and keep bringing it back. That's kind of how the direction was with him. And he even got onto he was talking about the British monarchy and the order of succession somehow. I don't even know how he got most of there. And then he eventually did, without me really telling him, he eventually did what he needed to do. And unfortunately, there's only like 5 seconds of it in the final cut. In the film. But because all he says is he's like, oh, I don't have any scenes with R2, but I really am going to ask George if I could do something in the next film or something.
Oh, man. That's amazing, man. Don, I mean, these stories literally, like, to me, this is literally, this is a gold mine of stories. I mean, you've answered some of my like
Mhm.
craziest questions about just R2. This is a mind blowing interview, Don. I mean, we went way beyond the time where we expected, and we appreciate you taking the time, and we want to respect obviously your time too,
Thank
because we could sit here and listen to these stories for
you.
hours, but.
Yeah.
But we really appreciate it, Don. And like I said, just your contribution to this fandom, and not only just this one, but again, a lot of this, and like you said, you and all these great, artists, right? That's what you guys are.
Mhm.
Um, literally molded a whole generation, and we're seeing it now again with the love of the prequels right now, with this, this love for those movies, that era. It's just amazing seeing it, and it's such an honor to have you on this show and hearing these amazing stories. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, and it is a lot of people, people like myself get a little bit more attention than others. And the thing is, ultimately, filmmaking is, and it's not just one director. It's not just the actor. That it's a complete team thing
It's a team.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
to do this. You can't make a movie in a vacuum. You can't,
Absolutely.
and so, like I said, unfortunately, the way some of it works is like some people get more credit than others, and
I understand.
but
Yeah, you're super humble, and just hearing some of your stories and what have you interacted with the others amongst your crew, you could tell
Yeah.
that you're one of those guys that is, hey, look, this is a team, and then that kind of shows why you did all the different things that you did, Don. Look, I mean, you were on a lot of different aspects of being a part of that. We've had industry guests like John that was worked at ILM and then didn't work at ILM and then worked at ILM again and then didn't. And I mean, that's how mind-boggling, and you were a part of that, and there's a reason that you were fortunate enough to be able to stay on board with them all that time. And
totally mercenary. I just needed to work.
yes,
I
yes.
tried to make myself invaluable.
Well,
Yeah.
I can just tell you right now, Don, that one of the greatest joys for me and what me and Gabe do for Collection Wars is we're able to archive these fantastic stories from people like you and other guys that would not normally ever be told. These stories that you told us tonight, it would never be knowledge, and now it is, and it's mind blowing
Yeah.
that even though I never made it out into the film industry in California, I'm now even at an older age interacting with all you awesome people on a different level of taking your stories and sharing them with everybody, and
Yeah.
that's a really big honor for me, and I know for Gabe as well. So.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes. And again, thank you so much, Don. Appreciate it so much. And, obviously you're welcome back anytime to tell us more of
We can
these
talk about those other movies I worked on.
Exactly. Yeah. I gotta go through that. Might have to have a whole R2 episode at some
I
point.
know, right? I was like, man, the R2 builders are going to like this
I
show.
know,
I
right?
didn't even expect to be that way.
I'm
And
actually interesting that you say that. I could plug it right now. Is on July 28th. I've been asked. This is a really huge honor for me. I totally out of the blue. The people that asked me, I didn't know, so I had no in on this. I'm going to be. They're going to be talking to me about R2 at the Academy Museum in LA. So,
Oh, awesome.
it's a series that they have called Building Character, and in this case, it's building character, how R2D2 was brought to life. So,
What's going to be involved with that, Don? What are you going to be
it's just
doing?
me and a moderator talking, similar to
cool.
this. So,
Very,
except
very
they only got an hour, so I have to talk faster. But
yeah, right.
Is it going to be open?
you'll probably hear some of the same stories. It's a free story. It's a free thing at the museum.
Oh, it's gonna be at the
at
Academy.
the actual Academy Museum. Yeah.
Oh, I'm
So
gonna
I don't
have
think
to
it's being
start.
streamed or anything like that, but
Oh,
it's free. It's 100% free.
I
So
might have to swim. Yeah, I'm in San Diego, so I'm
cool.
nearby.
Yeah, July 28th. You can get tickets now if you go to the Academy Museum website.
Oh, perfect. Awesome.
That's great.
Well, Don, again, thank you so much for this. This has been absolutely one of my favorite episodes of all time that we've done.
Thank you.
This one we don't think they can get better. We do this happens quite a bit, and then all of a sudden it's better. You know, it's like there's no way it's gonna get better.
It's going in the right direction at least.
Yeah, it is. But what's funny too? There's a lot of little connections too. Like you mentioned, your love for like the horror movies and all stuff. We had Don Post on our show talking about those masks.
I know Don.
Yeah.
We worked together because when they made the R2s and C-3POs for
we talked about that. We talked about the tools on Boba Fett's shins and all that. How he was working on those with the life side. Yeah, and it's so cool how it kind of just.
He's got a fascinating history with his father.
Yeah, we
talked about it. Yeah. You need to watch that episode.
I'm gonna check it out.
This is Don's 3PO right here.
Oh, right, cool.
Yeah.
It's the best one to do out there for sure, no doubt.
Yeah. All right, Don. Well, thank you again, and we will. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you real soon.
Great. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for your time tonight, Don.
Sure.
Talk to me, buddy. You're mute.
There you go.
What do you think, buddy?
Oh, crazy. I mean, those stories. And then obviously, we stayed on a little bit after and just talked a little bit more. And just, I mean, we stayed on almost to midnight our time. I mean, it was just so amazing. All his stories and just, he's such a humble person. And, it's just mind-boggling, and you're hearing all these crazy stories, right?
Yeah, it was great. Just listening to him again, I was on most of the time listening, and it's crazy. It's so crazy.
I know, right?
It went by quick, right? It was like it's 11:36. So,
and what obviously what I do want to we want to plug. Make sure if you guys are willing to donate to Grant's Steam Foundation, the link is below on the description of this video. And also, if anyone's in the LA area or nearby, Don's event at the Academy Museum, like he said, it's going to be free. So that'd be really cool if we could, get a couple of people kind of in the SoCal area to show up and show support. And that'd be a cool little meetup. So good. Yeah, it looks like it's the 28th, right?
You think you're gonna make it?
So the 28th, I think it's Comic-Con weekend, I want to say. So I guess it just depends if I'm already all Comic-Con'd out, Yeah, right, yeah. So I'm gonna be there. Yeah, I'm gonna be there Wednesday through Sunday. So I mean,
Joseph's gonna be there, isn't he?
Joseph's gonna be there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
We'll meet up on some of those days. So
I was looking for this model thing I wanted to share with everybody.
That he worked on?
No, this is a different gentleman that I was going to bring up to you guys.
Well, we could, we could definitely show that next week.
Yeah.
Look at everyone staying up late to watch this one. Yeah. Cool.
Wow. Rio de Janeiro.
I know, right?
That's so cool.
5:35 in the UK.
Jeez.
I know, right?
That's so awesome, guys. You guys are so cool.
Yeah. But yeah, no, that was definitely one of my favorite interviews. And it was just so cool to just be able to talk to him.
Man, you bringing up that blue paint. I'm like, okay, why are you bringing it? And then all of a sudden he's like, yeah, I did that. I came up with that. That's good. You're like, what?
The hypo blue, it's crazy.
You've brought that up probably 5 different episodes before. You know what I mean? Seriously.
Yeah, I mean it's
the odds,
It's a thing too, and even as he's describing it, right? It's still kind of like there's still some debate, right? Even there, he's like, well, now I think it's the Dicam blue. So it's definitely still kind of up in the air, So
you know what blows me away is, and this is, I mean, having all these industry guests, but it's crazy because the more and more that we have on here, but like this guy was around Lucas all the time, you know what I mean? And obviously he's keeps to himself, and it's very respectful. But man, it's just like to be able to travel with all these crews and all the different actors, and then I mean he suited up. I mean, that story alone of just hey, what about doing got an idea about Boba Fett, and it's his lunchtime, and
Yeah.
he's calling ass over to the archives
It just, yeah.
and picks up a Boba Fett,
Like
he
that's
pieces together, and then you have all
right.
these guys are trying to, hey, that doesn't, it's not the right outfit, and he's like, hey,
Right.
I picked it up out of a freaking
You
box.
know what? I actually watched it today. Yeah, because I wanted to see the jetpack, and yeah, you could see
Yeah,
the slash. Like it's
yeah,
clear he does kind of go a little too far, angled, and you
yeah.
could see the slash.
You know
Yeah,
what's cool though is that he actually fit in it. He was able to fit in that thing. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah, yeah.
So,
I
but
know, man.
just the the touching of the cheek of that chick, and
Yeah,
and how everything worked out. Because I thought that was classy. You know what I mean?
no, yeah,
So, but yeah,
absolutely. Well, I mean, hopefully, we're gonna have more industry guests, right?
yes,
We
yeah,
talked to them about, possibly having some others. I mean, the names, right? The names that he was dropping, it's like
yeah.
just crazy, right? Like when I pulled out the plaque, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
I
that was
know all
fun
of them."
afterwards.
Yeah.
A lot of guys didn't realize that he showed us his personal little lightsaber collection, which
Oh
was,
yeah, his stuff. Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
mean to say little. I mean, he might not have had a big quantity, but they were grail pieces, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, it was definitely one of my favorite interviews for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things that's kind of tough sometimes is getting these guys. But just so you guys know that I work hard, and Gabe works really hard to reach out, and find these people, or people that we know that know these people, and they're what an honor, right, Gabe, to have them on Collection Wars. And
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and if I can say this right now, Gabe, this is something that you actually brought up, because we see this on Instagram, and we see it on other channels, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Star Wars collectible related, but
Mhm.
you see all these people like, oh, we're at the 5,000 subscribers, or and we're
Mhm.
going to give this away, or we're doing this, and
Mhm.
they're constantly hitting up so many different things in one day. And the
Mhm.
thing I think that really sets Collection Wars apart, and you said it, is it's our content. We come out once a week,
Yeah,
and just the content that we put out there, whether it's one of our viewers,
yeah,
collections, or having these industry guests. I never in 1,000 years would have thought, a little over a year ago, Gabe, when me and you were talking that late night, that, look, man, we're going to be talking to people like this,
yeah.
and meeting these people that are hanging out with us on the 4th of July weekend.
I know. I
It
know.
just really means a lot to me. And
Yeah,
so,
absolutely,
and I
absolutely.
know it sounds kind of weird. I'm weird now a little bit, but I really wanted to be a part so bad, like so many people
Yeah,
that didn't get the opportunity to be a part of that, and to be able, at an older age, be able to share these stories and hang out with these people, and
yeah,
it's just getting, it's just,
yeah.
it's
I mean,
awesome.
literally. I mean, that's what we basically did yesterday. Like, right? It was
Yeah,
like the equivalent of going out to dinner with him, right? And for
yeah,
4 hours, or
yeah,
however long
yeah,
we ended up
yeah.
staying there. I mean, and we could have sat there and talked to him for much longer than that.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we literally almost midnight to.
yeah. It's
No,
really cool, man.
it's
It's really,
really cool
really
to,
cool.
yeah, to just get to meet so many cool people, and just be a part of this community, and just the wider community, right? Like
Yeah, right.
our community, the collecting community. It is a
Yes.
niche, right? It's a very small community.
Yes.
But then, guests like these just obviously have just this wider reach,
We've
for,
we've got a niche.
yeah,
We've got a little niche that we put
yeah,
together.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
just like Jason said, quality, not quantity. And it's really,
Yeah,
really cool, man. I look forward to this. And
absolutely, man.
and and
That goes for collections too sometimes, right? Like,
yes.
um,
Yeah, we already have a really cool collection to show soon,
yeah,
and you
yeah,
know, but yeah,
cool.
it's crazy stuff. But
Yeah,
guys, thanks so much for joining Gabe and I. I really, really enjoy this, and you
yeah,
guys have a safe rest of your weekend. I'm glad it's a long weekend for everybody,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and
Enjoy it. Stay safe.
for
You
damn sure.
know, don't
Yeah,
don't be drinking and driving. I don't want to get no calls, middle of the
So
night.
I've been back and forth tonight. I'm kind of binge watching the last 3 of the episodes of Stranger Things that just came out, the final season of it, and checking
Yeah,
all that.
I want to do that too. Yeah, I probably tomorrow I'll spend the day binge watching it.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. Well,
Cool,
cool,
brother.
everybody. Thanks for all the kind words, everybody.
Yeah.
Towards the end there. So,
All
and
right.
I saw
Yeah.
Scott hopped on. It's good to see Scott on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, you guys take care.
Yeah.
We will see you next weekend.
We'll see you guys, and next week. And again, have a safe 4th of July.
Absolutely.
See you guys.
Thank you, guys.
You're all clear, kid. Now let's blow this thing and go home.